So this was a terrible fire at a London cemetery where 31 people died. The mystery was that one victim wasn't recognized for 16 years. Monkey chain. People used to think that monkeys would make a living chain to cross bodies of water. Scientists are like, no, but there was this one Jesuit priest who said that back in the 1500s he saw one, so... Machine elves, aka DMT elves, are these elf-looking things that people see when they're on DMT. This one professor, Rick Strassman, did a study with 60 volunteers and he had them all take DMT, and for some reason they kept consistently seeing these DMT elves. This makes people think they're being contacted by like an interdimensional being. Don't do drugs. Uncanny Valley refers to the fact that humans feel discomfort or fear whenever they look at something that looks human but isn't quite human. Some people think the reason why we do this is to quickly identify diseased or decaying humans, but others think the reason why is because there was a prehistoric predator that would use its human-lookingness to get close to us, to eat us. Structure of Lake McDonald. For some reason, there's this man-made rock thing 40 feet deep in the lake in Glacier National Park. It is a 1,000-pound long flat rock that's almost completely level, resting on 7 baseball-sized stones. No one knows why it's there or who put it there, and it's just a big mystery. The Committee of 300 is the theory that there is a powerful group that was founded by British aristocracy back in 1727, basically to rule the world. These 300 individuals were said to be an international council that organizes politics, banking, media, and military events. What's cool about this theory is it dates back to a German politician, Walther Rathenau, who in 1909 wrote about these 300 men who basically controlled the world. New York Eternal Flame. There's basically a waterfall in the western part of New York State that has natural gas coming out from behind the water that produces a flame. The lore behind it is people think that the Seneca tribe did a ritual to cause an eternal flame to burn all the time, but this thing goes out all the time. They have to relight it. Gandalf.com. This is just a creepy website that has a picture of a creepy man at the end of a hall. When you click on it, it zooms in on it and says, Gandalf is busy, please go away. There's not much else besides just that. Gödel's incompleteness theorem. This is basically a theory that there are certain mathematical equations that are true but are impossible to prove. Philosophers use this theory to argue that the universe is irrational or that God exists. Cain is Bigfoot. This is a Mormon theory. Some people in the Mormon church think that Cain, Adam's son, killed his brother Abel and then was cursed by God, and this curse basically turned him into Bigfoot. The reason they think this is because there are these books written about their apostles in the Mormon church, and one of them said that he was riding a donkey or a horse across the wilderness when he came across this giant man standing eye to eye with him while he's all the way up on a horse, and that the man was really hairy and that he claimed he was Cain. So... yeah. The highway water mirage, I'm sure you've seen this. Sometimes the sun bends light downward on a really hot day and makes it look like there's water on the road. Brocken spectra. If you're on a mountain and you see your shadow on a cloud below you that looks really huge, basically the sun is shining behind a person, making the shadow through the mist magnify and look huge. Sometimes it's surrounded by a rainbow ring because light scatters backwards towards you. Fata Morgana. Sometimes air temperatures that are close to the horizon can bend light near the horizon, making distant objects look like they're stretched or floating in the air, or it's just ghost ships. Magnetic Hill. There are places where the road looks like it is going uphill, but it's actually going downhill. So it makes you think your car is rolling uphill. Chicago Skyline Mirage, I've actually seen this once. Sometimes you could see a giant city across Lake Michigan, and it looks like it's floating because the atmosphere is bending the light near the water, making it look like it's floating or a little bit off the ground, and sometimes it's upside down. It's really kind of weird. Look at that. Aurora Borealis. This is just the interaction between solar wind from the sun hitting Earth's magnetic field, causing pretty lights. Back in the old days, there was a lot of interesting theories, like one that said that the Earth had a giant hole in the North Pole and there was gas emitting from the hole, and that's what the Northern Lights were. I really like that one. The Green Flash. This is actually really neat. It's actually real, and people don't think it is. It's not just from Pirates of the Caribbean. Sometimes at just the right moment during sunset or sunrise, you can see a distinct green spot that lasts for just 2 seconds or more, and that's because of the sun just barely refracting into the water, causing different colors because of the atmosphere. Or it's the soul escaping Davy Jones. Moon illusion, I bet you've seen this one too. Sometimes when the moon is really low to the horizon, it looks really big. And this can actually happen not just with the moon, but also mountains and buildings. China's floating city. No, this is not Operation Bluebeam yet. So thousands of people have said they've seen floating cities in China, and this has actually happened on multiple occasions. Some like to say that it's just NASA testing out a holographic machine to see what people would do, but more likely it's just what I talked about earlier, the Fata Morgana mirage. And this usually happens in areas of high pollution, and it basically just reflects the image upwards, and that's why it looks like it's floating in the sky. Sundog angel phenomenon. Basically, on cold days, usually up the mountains, ice crystals can bend sunlight to make bright spots on either side of the sun, and it can also create halos sometimes, or even angel wings. I would love to see this someday. Anyways, follow for more weird videos just like this. Atlantis, everybody knows this place. It was first mentioned by Greek philosopher Plato, and it was maybe fictional. Plato said the founders of Atlantis was half god, half human. It was said to be a utopian civilization and be a great naval power, and that their city was full of abundant gold and precious minerals and rare animals. But some people really think it was the Eye of the Sahara, but did it actually exist? 52 Hertz whale. This was a sound heard between 1989 and 2004, and it came from a single source broadcasting a frequency between 50 and 52 Hertz. What's weird about this is they assumed that a whale was making this noise. However, the creature producing the noise was making around a 50 Hertz sound, whereas normal whales produce between 10 and 39 Hertz, which is really sad because it's too low for humans to hear and it's too high for whales to hear, so we assume that the whale has been completely alone for its entire life, not able to contact other whales. Its movements correspond with whale migrations in the area, but nobody has seen it for sure. So it could actually be a monster. Bimini Road is an area located between the Bahamas and Miami on the Bimini Islands, where there are these large square blocks that are in a perfectly straight line, and people refer to it as the Bimini Road. What's crazy is there's over a half a mile of this road. It's just a bunch of stones in a straight line, and people say that it was part of some sort of ancient road system, perhaps, maybe a lost colony, or a lost continent, or the lost continent of Atlantis, or it's just evidence from some sort of civilization that existed before water levels rose, which would be crazy because it would be roughly 2,000 years old. Cuba pyramids. This one is really crazy. Around 2 decades ago, they discovered these structures using sonar that were 2,000 feet below the surface off the coast of Cuba. Pictures were taken that looks really compelling that it's real. There's like these 2 or 3 large pyramids, and then there's like square looking room areas. I mean, it really looks like a real place that was actually a civilization. But I mean, it would be nearly impossible for this to have been a civilization unless there's like a huge part of history we have no idea about, which, I mean, there is. Geologists say that if this was a sunken city, it would have taken over 50,000 years to have gotten to that depth. So they would have had to have been an extremely advanced civilization that was in the wrong time and in the wrong place. Phantom Islands, these are islands that were once somewhere but are no longer, or they never were. Examples are Lumeria, Thule, and even Bermeja, which there's this conspiracy about how like the CIA came in and bombed Bermeja Island out of existence to take away Mexico's oil rights in that area, which is just a conspiracy, extremely unlikely that they could have ever pulled that off. Anyways, all these islands have either been on a map, or they've sunken into the ocean, or they never existed at all and people thought they were there, but they weren't. Seafloor holes. Back in 2022, this line of holes appeared on the ocean floor 8,000 feet deep. And what's interesting is back in 2004, a similar group of holes were found in the same area in the mid-Atlantic ridge. Scientists don't know how they are formed. Some people think they're just hydrothermal vents where like heated fluid rises up out of the ground and makes the holes, where others hypothesize that it's just like a little creature that digs down into the sand and leaves them, but it's probably just Cthulhu. The black carpet. This is an ocean cryptid that is described by divers to be over 1,000 feet long. It's said to look like a group of jet black microorganisms with like little feelers like a jellyfish. People theorize that if the black carpet actually is real, then it's related to like the single-celled organism that lived billions of years ago in the ocean. Underwater UFOs. Keep in mind, if anything says UFO, it just means unidentified flying object. However, there are a lot of instances where, like, the military or the Navy see something that they don't recognize flying through the air that goes into the ocean or that comes out of the ocean and then flies really fast. There's a lot of instances of underwater UFO things in the deepest lake in the world, Lake Baikal. Call of the Deep. This is a strange phenomenon where divers are diving at extreme depths and they all of a sudden like fall into a trance and then try to swim down, and then they swim down really far and die. There's multiple instances of this happening and they just swim down and are never seen again. A lot of people think that this is just caused by nitrogen narcosis, which is just something that makes you like feel drunk and confused. Pretty terrifying thought. Cosmic ocean. This is more of like a mythological concept that was like everything outside of Earth is a vast primordial water. Like everything up there is an ocean. But there's also more of a conspiratorial thing where people think that space is an ocean. And people who think this think that we are essentially trapped on Earth and we can't go past the firmament, which is like the atmosphere. And we tried to break the seal out of the atmosphere between Earth and the cosmic ocean by doing different things like testing nuclear weapons up in the atmosphere close to space, like Operation Fishbowl, where they were detonating those up really high. And they thought that maybe it was going to set fire to the entire atmosphere, but they didn't know, and they did it anyways, but it looked like a giant fishbowl when it blew up. Different kinds of life theory, or different forms of life theory, is the idea that aliens may be so different from us that we don't recognize what they are or what signals they're putting out there. This could be things like them being in a different dimension and like existing in a way that we just don't understand. Like they could be spooky, wooky things. The faraway theory, or signal propagation issues. This is the idea that extraterrestrials have sent signals out to us, but their signals are too weak because they're so far away, or there's just no way they have enough resources to get to us or contact us at all. Early bird theory. This is the idea that Earth is one of the first planets to ever develop intelligent life. Scientists are saying that Earth is around 13.8 billion years old, and Earth was formed about 4.5 billion years ago. So life on Earth began quite early in the cosmic terms, but I mean, like, how do they know? The amount of time that we know is all that is known to anybody, so how would they even judge that on the scale of if we're early or not? Whatever. Anyways, this says that if conditions for life are super rare, then the process to leading up to intelligent life are extremely slow, and Earth may just be one of the first planets. The Great Silence Theory. This is literally another way to say the Fermi paradox, which is just asking the question that if life exists, why haven't we found it yet? So yeah, there is a great silence. The self-destruction theory. This is a scary idea, but pretty realistic. This theorizes that maybe advanced civilizations might inevitably self-destruct before they can communicate or travel to other civilizations. This could be due to war, environmental destruction, or other factors, and maybe advanced civilizations just tend to destroy themselves before they develop the ability to communicate with other civilizations. The conspiracy theory, I'm guessing this is just referring to the Men in Black because the picture is of Men in Black. And if you know the Men in Black from the movie, it's the idea that there's this big government or like worldwide organization that's covering up the existence of aliens. So I'm guessing this theory is that aliens have already visited us or are present on Earth, but it's not widely known or recognized by the public. The Great Filter Theory, or the Rare Earth Hypothesis, is the idea that there are highly improbable steps in the evolution of life that civilizations have to do to become like a big civilization. Basically, complex life is rare and Earth is a unique exception. This argues that the biological complexity of life is just super rare to happen, and that, you know, maybe advanced civilizations exist for a short time, but they rarely overlap on the cosmic scale, and that's why, like, there's been civilizations, but they're gone now. Ties in with self-destruction theory. The zoo theory, or the zoo hypothesis / incubation theory. The incubation theory is just about how advanced civilizations maybe deliberately avoid contacting Earth until we reach a certain level of maturity. In this situation, advanced civilizations might be looking at Earth, but we might be dinosaurs because they might be billions of light years away, and they see us a really long time ago. And the zoo hypothesis theory is just the idea that advanced civilizations avoid contacting Earth to allow the natural evolution to develop on Earth for life and stuff, and that advanced civilizations exist, but they leave us like a zoo, and they just Watch us. This theory would also assume that there are cultures that exist throughout the galaxy, and they have great reverence for just the natural process of the development of civilization. Some people like to also say that our zoo, Earth, has a zookeeper, alien thing, and that it wants to accelerate our morals and ethics in our society to make us overcome the want to destroy ourselves and our neighbors before they contact us. And so how would an alien civilization accelerate our morals and ethics? Maybe by giving us nuclear capabilities, and then once we're able to be peaceful with that, maybe then they establish contact? Alright, last one, dark forest theory. This one's really scary. This is just the idea that there's a bunch of civilizations out there, but they just remain silent because there's some massive predator out there in space that could destroy everything. Civilizations remain silent to avoid detection from potentially hostile aliens. Probably a better way to put it is that because intentions and technological development rates are unknown, alien races likely fall into one of two camps. Shoot first, or hide because others will likely shoot first. So yeah, every other civilization is a hunter trying to avoid detection, and they're just animals in a forest trying to avoid the predator, and it's really scary because of the story of Ultimaros, the Q. There were like these godlike aliens that came and found Earth, and humanity basically looked like bugs to them, and then we tried to wage war on them, but they were like, what are you doing? And they just turned us into basically cattle and enslaved us for a long time. It doesn't belong to anyone. No single country owns Antarctica. Instead, Antarctica is governed by the Antarctic Treaty System, which basically means the entire continent is a scientific preserve that bans military activity, which is really weird because why does the entire world not agree on anything except that Antarctica is everyone's? And also, I understand, like, protect the coast of Antarctica because they have a nice ecosystem, but the interior is just like a wasteland, and they still protect it and have like a bunch of no-fly zones, and it's weird. Blood Falls. This is a stream that is red like blood, but it is not. Water is flowing from this huge glacier, Taylor Glacier, and the water is full of iron, and as soon as air hits that iron, it turns blood red. World War II German base. This conspiracy suggests that Germany during World War II built a secret base in Antarctica. One of the main reasons people think this is because there was this real thing that actually did happen, where a German submarine, the U-530, did not surrender at the end of World War II, but showed up in Argentina, South America, and for some reason was missing for 2 whole months before it came to Argentina and surrendered. So yeah, where did it go for 2 months? Was it in Antarctica? Anyways, regardless, there are now a ton of Germans in Argentina to this day. The cave. This is extremely vague. Could be referring to the rumored caves on Google Earth that look kind of weird, or it could be referring to a hidden ecosystem or an ancient civilization, but I bet this is referring to the big conspiracy about how there's a giant hole in the South Pole that leads to the mythical city of Agartha inside of Hollow Earth. Pyramids. There is actually a mountain called the Pyramid that is a very distinct peak in Antarctica. A lot of people think it's literally a pyramid from an ancient civilization, but scientists say it's just a natural mountain formation. It is worth noting though that some pyramids before they were excavated really look like mountains just like that, so. Volcanoes. Antarctica has roughly 19 volcanoes along with several active volcanoes, including Mount Erebus on Ross Island, which is the southernmost active volcano on Earth, and one of the most active volcanoes too. What's crazy about Mount Erebus is that it spews out roughly 80 grams, which is 0.18 pounds of gold daily, which is worth $6,000 a day. Ross Island, this is where that one volcano is at. This is the island where the biggest research station, McMurdo Station in Antarctica is. A lot of people think that it's part of the mainland of Antarctica, but it's actually an island and ice covers it. Ningen, this is a cryptid that was allegedly found by a Japanese whale research vessel near Antarctica. It's described as this humanoid whale-looking creature that looks more like a whale and a human mixed. Anyways, people think that this was a real picture that was on Google Earth, but sadly, it is not real. There's no scientific evidence of this thing existing other than word of mouth. Carl R. Dish. This is an American scientist that disappeared from Byrd Station in Antarctica in 1965. It seems like he just stepped out of the radio noise building that he worked at and just fell off the face of the earth, because his body was never found, and this disappearance is still a mystery to this day. Some like to say that maybe it was a cover-up, or he found something he wasn't supposed to, or he never actually died, or that he's inside of Hollow Earth. Organism 46b, this is an online story about this alien-like octopus creature that is allegedly beneath Antarctic's deep lake, Lake Vostok. The story goes that scientists find this highly dangerous, intelligent, shape-shifting thing that slowly picks them off one by one, but really it's just a fictional story that this guy wrote online, but it's really cool. The Philosopher's Stone, this is a mythical object that was said to be able to take regular metal like mercury and turn it into gold or silver. This one king, King Rudolf II of Bohemia, actually tried to find the stone for so long and ended up using a lot of random things that he thought was the stone that was probably really toxic, and he ended up going completely insane. It was a total alchemist moment. Anyways, we're still not for sure what this thing actually was. The Patiala necklace. This was a huge necklace made for Indian royalty of Patiala that's worth $2.6 billion. It contained 2,930 diamonds, and the centerpiece was the second largest yellow diamond in the world. Anyways, it disappeared in 1946, but the giant yellow diamond actually reappeared in 1982 at an auction in Switzerland. So while some of the necklace has been found, much of it is still out there and we don't know where it's at. Emma Chamberlain wore a recreation of the necklace at some event, but literally, who cares about a necklace? Like, what are you gonna do with it? Wear it? Look at this. I got a Pip-Boy. This is 1,000,000 times more useful. The Excalibur. This was the mythical sword of King Arthur. It was said to possess magical powers. Some people say that King Arthur pulled this sword out of the stone, while many other people say that it was actually the sword that was given to him by the Lady of the Lake, which was this mermaid lady thing. Historically, the sword that people think Excalibur actually was discovered during the uncovering of Arthur's grave in England in 1191, and then the possible Excalibur sword was then gifted from the English king Richard the Lionheart to his ally Tancred, the king of Sicily. I like swords. The Ark of the Covenant, everybody knows what this is. It's a religious artifact that stored the Ten Commandments from the Old Testament in the Bible. There's one church, St. Mary of Zion in Ethiopia, that claims to have the real Ark of the Covenant, and that only one guardian monk can view it. And there's also this other guy, this professor from London, that said that he examined this thing back in World War II, and that it looked like a wooden box that was created during medieval times, and it's terribly infested with termites. And anyways, it was very likely just destroyed whenever Babylon took over Jerusalem an incredibly long time ago. Don't you guys remember? They found it. There was a whole movie about it. The Amber Room, bro, they lost an entire room somehow. This was a room that was created in Germany back in the early 1700s. It was covered in 6 tons of amber stones and leaf gold valued at $500 million. Oh, how these people have such expensive stuff. Anyways, during World War II, the room was dismantled and eventually disappeared. It was looted by the World War II German group, and then in 1997, 4 of the amber stones from the famous room was discovered in Germany that was in possession of a soldier from Germany who said he actually helped them pack up the room back in the day. Anyways, most of the room has never been found, and it's likely hidden in some salt mine or down at the bottom of the lake somewhere in Germany. And the Amber Room was reconstructed in the Catherine Palace in modern day. The Tomb of Cleopatra. The Cleopatra tomb location has never been discovered. We assume that Cleopatra, along with Mark Antony, were buried together in Alexandria, Egypt, but we still have not been able to find this. Very likely because of an earthquake 1,400 years ago that caused this huge tsunami to hit the city of Alexandria, which then sank the island of Atir Hodos, taking down Cleopatra's palace and the old Alexandria lighthouse, which was a wonder of the world at one point. Anyways, the tomb of Cleopatra was likely beneath this palace, and it's now 16 feet underwater, and there's more than 2,000 artifacts down underwater, and you can scuba dive to see it, and I really want to do it. The Elixir of Immortality, also known as the Elixir of Life. They thought that the Philosopher's Stone could create this elixir that was like a mythical potion that supposedly grants the drinker eternal life or eternal youth, and could also just cure all diseases. That's about it. Enoch and Elijah. According to the Old Testament, these were the only 2 people who went up to heaven without dying. That's about it. Enoch was said to just kind of be taken there, while Elijah was said to be taken up to heaven on a chariot of fire. Die Glocke, this translates directly to the bell. This is an alleged highly advanced technology that Germany was allegedly experimenting with during World War II. Basically, this is a conspiracy theory about how they had anti-gravity technology or a time machine, and it looked like a giant bell, and it glowed, and it was highly radioactive, but many believe that this whole story was just a big hoax. Solomon's Ring, this is the Ring of Solomon or the Seal of Solomon. This was a legendary signet ring that was allegedly owned by King Solomon, the son of the more famous King David in the Old Testament. After doing lots of research, there's no biblical evidence of this story at all, but what people say is that the angel Gabriel gave Solomon this ring that could control demons and jinn, and that he used the demons to build the temple, and also that the ring gave him the ability to talk to and control animals, and also it could control weather, and he could summon wind and rain, and also he could cure all illnesses with it. And they also said that it gave him wisdom, rather than the actual biblical story where he asked God for a discerning heart or an understanding mind / obedient heart, and he was given wisdom as a gift from God, rather than this random ring. The staircase in the Loretto Chapel. This is a spiral staircase inside of a church in Santa Fe, New Mexico that many regard as a miracle or a mystery because of how amazing the architecture is. The stairs are built with no center support, mostly out of wood and held together by wooden pegs, without using glue, nails, or other hardware. The legend is that 2 nuns prayed for 9 days straight, and on the 9th day, a mysterious stranger appeared on the back of a donkey and offered to build the stairs. It was said that he worked alone, only using a few tools, and then suddenly disappeared afterwards without collecting pay or the nuns finding out his identity. While some stories say he built it overnight, others say it took 6 to 8 months. The Dancing Plague of 1518. Back in 1518, in what is now modern-day Strasbourg, France, somewhere between 50 to 400 people started dancing for weeks. It started off with just one woman dancing uncontrollably in the street with no music, but then soon grew into a crowd of dancers. Local authorities noticed and then decided to stop it by placing musicians there to help them dance it out. Anyways, this plan backfired and people started collapsing, or some even died of stroke or heart attack, and then the authorities were like, no, we're banning public dancing. Historically, we're not sure how many actually died from this. It could have just been a few people to up to hundreds of people died. As far as why this happened, people like to say it's because of demon possession or just good old mass hysteria. But a theory that I like is that it's ergot poisoning, this fungus that grows in bread and causes people to go crazy with like hallucinations and spasms, which would kind of make sense. The Pied Piper of Hamelin. This is a legendary mythological story about back in the 1200s in Hamelin, Germany. There was a terrible infestation of rats, and this guy with a flute was like, I can get rid of them. And the king was like, I'll pay you $1,000. And he was like, okay. And he got him out of the city, and then the king was like, no, you're only getting $50. And then he's like, okay. And then he came back and he used the flute and kidnapped all the children. And that's about it. Some people say this event was based on the true story of the Children's Crusade. The mystery of Croatoan. So the Roanoke colony, or the lost colony of Roanoke, is what most people call the story. This was one of the first permanent English settlements trying to survive in newly discovered America. Back in 1588, the governor of Roanoke, John White, made a trip back to England for supplies. He was delayed for 2 years, but made it back to Roanoke in 1590. When he got there, he found the settlement fortified but abandoned, with the word Croatoan carved into a fence post. A lot of people like to say that nobody knows what happened to them, but it seems a lot like he had a deal with them to carve the name of wherever they went into a post whenever he got back so he'd know where they went. And what I believe happened was the people of Roanoke had actually lived on the island of Croatoan before taking their colony to Roanoke and establishing it there. So they just went back to that island. But that guy never reunited with his family. He just went back to England because I don't think the sailors wanted to go back to Croatoan. The Philadelphia experiment. This was an experiment by the U.S. Navy that allegedly happened back during World War II. This one guy, Carl M. Allen, just claimed that this happened to him when he was in the Philadelphia shipyard. He said that he was watching a destroyer ship test out a cloaking device, and that at first it was successful and it had disappeared, it was invisible. But then suddenly the ship teleported all the way to Norfolk, Virginia for several minutes, and then reappeared back in the Philadelphia shipyard. He then said the crew of the ship suffered from various side effects, from insanity to not being able to be touched like they weren't really there, to being frozen in place. I wish this was real, but it seems like this is just a story that one guy said and there's not a whole lot of witnesses. But no, it's real. The Man from Tord. This is another story about a man who back in 1954 arrived in a Japanese airport with a passport saying that he was from a country called Tord. Security was sussed of him and they asked him a bunch of questions and he pointed on a map where his country was, which he said it was between Germany and France, and he was confused that our map didn't show his country. In this guy's possession, he had money from several real countries in Europe and his passport had many stamps on it, like he'd actually traveled to a lot of places with this passport. Anyways, security put him in a room of a hotel on the top floor to stay, and then he just disappeared overnight and was never seen again. People like to say that this guy was like a glitch in the Matrix. He glitched between realities and he wasn't meant to be here. But a lot of people say the story was just kind of made up, like an amalgamation of a couple other stories. The Tunguska event. This was the largest asteroid impact in recorded history. So this happened back in 1908 in Siberia, Russia. There was this huge shock wave that knocked people off their feet and broke windows for over 100 miles away. Seismic stations that detected earthquakes actually picked this thing up as far away as Washington, D.C. The impact flattened 80 million trees. It's kind of still argued about what actually happened. While some people think it was just a meteor hitting Earth, a lot of scientists believe that it was a comet entering Earth's atmosphere, exploding and then bouncing off and going back into space. The disappearance of Lake Ujjukuni. So this was a mass disappearance in northern Canada back in 1930. There was this entire Inuit village full of people, and this trapper who was very well known in the village went through and found it completely abandoned. He said that there was unfinished shirts with needles still in them, food hanging up over the fire pits, and he concluded that the villagers had just suddenly left. A lot of people like to say there was some supernatural thingies that got them, while others say the story was just exaggerated. Overtown Bridge. This is a bridge in Scotland where countless dogs have jumped off and perished over many years. Some even jumping off, getting hurt really bad, and then climbing back on the bridge and jumping off again. There's a lot of theories to why this happens, from people saying that the trees around the bridge make it look like the ground's right there, but it's not, to there being a really big mink population down there and the dogs just want to go at them. And anyways, there was another situation where this schizophrenic man did something terrible on the bridge, but people say there's a lot of dark spirits there because of druidic days of the druids doing weird stuff there. Hoher Veer Day. This is another mass disappearance where allegedly 600 people from a village in the jungles of Brazil disappeared. Back in 1923, these neighbors came into a nearby town and realized that the town was completely dead, there was no one there. So they got the police, and the police came and looked and found no evidence of what had happened. They said they found a gun that was recently fired, and the words, "There is no salvation," written on a blackboard. There's so little information on this particular disappearance that many people think that this town didn't exist at all, or that the entire thing is just a myth. Termite swarmers. Reproductive termites can live for like 4 years, but when they swarm, if they leave the nest and don't find soil fast enough, they only live for like 40 minutes. I think this guy actually meant to put mayflies because they usually live for only 24 hours and they mate the entire time. Hamster, they live on average like 2 to 3 years, but they always die the most horrific deaths for some reason. Bald eagles live about 20 to 30 years on average in the wild, but the longest living bald eagle lived about 50 years in captivity. The orange ruffy, on average, these things live around 150 years. Some can live up to 250 years. What may cause this is these fish live pretty deep. Some live about 500 to 6,000 feet deep in water, and they don't reach reproductive maturity until at least 20 years old. Galapagos tortoise. The oldest Galapagos tortoise was named Jonathan, of course, and it's estimated he was 191 years old as of 2024. There's this crazy picture of him from 1886. It's so old. The red sea urchin. These things live to at least 100 years old, but some live over 200 years. The carp. Common carp live on average 15 to 20 years. However, some carp like koi can live a super long time. The oldest recorded living one was 226 years old. I had no idea. Greenland shark. This is the world's oldest shark. They live on average 250 years. The oldest they've found is estimated to be 329 years old, give or take 120 years, but it was born between 1504 to 1744. But regardless, there are definitely Greenland shark out there that are older than the United States itself. Sea sponge, SpongeBob reference. According to Google, Antarctica sponges live a minimum of 15,000 years. One species of Antarctic sponge that lives in the Ross Sea is estimated to be 23,000 years old. But, you know, it's hard to tell exactly how long these things have lived because of sea level fluctuations, but it does appear to be the longest lived animal on Earth. Immortal jellyfish, people say these things live potentially forever because what basically happens is that after reaching maturity, if they get injured or stressed or just get too old, it just reabsorbs its own body and transforms back into a baby blob. It's basically making a genetic clone of itself by destroying its body. Theoretically, this process could go on forever, making it biologically immortal, but it's probably more likely that due to predation and disease and environmental factors, it lives more likely 20 years or so. Marine fossils at the summit. Some scientists think the reason they find fossils from the ocean on the summit is due to the movement of tectonic plates, because they think where Everest stands now was part of the Tethys Sea, or it was just the Great Flood. The Yeti, also known as the Abominable Snowman. This is a legendary creature that's said to inhabit the Himalayan mountain range. It's described as a large ape-like creature that walked on two legs, and the legend's been part of Himalayan folklore for centuries. I heard a great theory about the Yeti that it wasn't just a mythical creature, but it was a prehistoric creature, the Gigantopithecus, because that thing lived over in southern China and could have came, you know, down to the Himalayan mountain range. It's not that far away. And that, you know, hypothetically, the ancient people that lived there passed down that story for years and years, and it became this legend about a giant, hairy monster creature. Because, I mean, the Gigantopithecus basically was that. Mysterious footprints. In 1951, this guy found these mysterious footprints above 15,000 feet of elevation, which was very strange because this was super high, and then it also looked like almost human footprints despite being 13 inches long. People like to say this is the best proof of the Yeti existing, while others say these prints are just a hoax. But later in 2019, people part of the Indian Army were in the mountains and they reported similar footprints in Nepal. But after I looked at the pictures, they're really not that great. The body of Hannelore Schmatz. It's estimated that 300 people have died climbing Everest, and there's roughly 200 bodies still on the mountain that we know of. Hannelore Schmatz is one of those bodies. She became the fourth woman to summit Everest back in 1979, but tragically lost her life due to exhaustion and exposure. She was climbing with her husband, and on the way down, they decided to camp without a tent at 27,000 feet, which the Sherpas told them not to do, and she just collapsed and died right there. But her remains remain visible to climbers. She was leaning up against this icy chunk, and it's now melted, but her body's still frozen like that. She was seen for a long time with her eyes open and her hair still blowing in the wind. People attempted to recover her body, but this resulted in other fatalities in the 80s, so they quit doing that. The madness of Maurice Wilson. Back in 1932, there was this one guy, Maurice Wilson, who had a crazy plan to climb Everest. The dude had never climbed mountains before or flown planes, but he planned to get a plane, crash land it on the slopes of Everest, and then climb the rest of the way up. Anyways, he bought an airplane, and after one lesson, he flew it illegally from England to India, where it was then impounded, and he walked on foot from Darjeeling, I know I pronounced that wrong, sorry, to the border of Tibet until he got to the base of Everest. And he was completely under-equipped to climb the mountain, but he climbed quite a ways up and he ended up dying of exhaustion at 22,000 feet. So he really made it pretty far. Green Boots. This is another body of an unidentified climber that became a landmark on the main northeast route of Everest. The leading theory is that this guy was a Tibetan Indo border policeman who died during the 1996 Everest disaster. Voices of the Void. This refers to these unexplained and eerie sounds reported by those who attempt to climb Everest. The sounds are described as whispers or cries or even like a conversation that comes out of nowhere. Some people think it's just like a phenomenon caused by high altitude causing hallucinations, while others think that the voices are from those who didn't make it back down. The mystery of Sandy Irvine. This is one of the greatest mysteries in all of mountaineering. In 1924, Sandy Irvine, along with his climbing partner, George Mallory, attempted to be the first people to reach the summit of Everest. They were last seen just a few hundred meters from the top of the mountain, but tragically, they didn't come back down. Mallory's body was found in 1999, but Irvine's body and the camera that he was believed to be carrying is yet to be discovered. The reason why this mystery is so important is because if someone found the camera, it might have photo evidence of those men being the first to summit Everest. The third man. This is another really weird phenomenon. Some explorers, just in general, not just people that go on Everest, say that when they get in really extreme conditions or when they're really alone, they sense this unseen presence, often described as a companion. And this presence encourages them and sometimes directs them to where they need to go whenever they really want to quit or just feel bad. The first man attempting to solo Everest on his own back in 1933, Frank Smythe, said he felt the presence so strong that he tried to share his food with it. And another guy, Ernest Shackleton, said he felt a similar presence during his Antarctic expedition. This is thought to be some sort of psychological way of coping with extreme stress, isolation, or exhaustion. The ghost of Everest. This is another phenomenon where climbers of Everest usually just sense the presence of a spirit or a ghost while they're on the mountain. The stories of these ghosts are very persistent. They say they often feel the presence of like deceased mountaineers that didn't make it back down. Some Sherpas say they see black shadows and believe that they are the spirits of the climbers who died, but it's very possible this is just caused by the high altitude or just the extreme exhaustion or stress. The Doomsday Vault in Norway. This is Svalbard Global Seed Vault. It is a super secluded underground doomsday bunker that houses backup copies of most plants from around the world. They say the reason why they created this vault is just in case some or all plants on Earth became extinct from things like war or disease or natural disaster or sabotage, like if some large corporation hypothetically created, like, let's say, a soybean that turns all other soybeans infertile, then it would have a backup copy for that. But they didn't do that. That's not a thing. But this vault is so extremely secluded. It is on a tiny island in the Arctic Ocean, midway between Norway and the North Pole, buried 394 feet into the side of a mountain, so nobody's gonna get there. Bohemian Grove. I'm sure you've heard conspiracies of people worshiping demons here. This is a huge campground area in California where a lot of famous and powerful people have been seen, like some past presidents like Ronald Reagan or Richard Nixon, to even really powerful people like Charles Schwab or Bill Gates. But what's really weird is some of the rituals that occur here, and I'm not saying that everybody who goes here does these rituals, but there's definitely some weird stuff that goes on. There's this famous video that someone's secretly god of one of the rituals. It appears to be a bunch of robed men who are, keep in mind, billionaires and like CEOs and heads of banks that appear to be worshiping this idol that looks like a demonic entity, and they're also burning this fake sacrifice to the owl effigy. Some think that the reason these people do this is to get secret knowledge from these evil forces, or that powerful people are in these secret societies that like require them to do a humiliation ritual in order to be one of the powerful people. Others believe they're just messing around. It's just a joke. You know, they're just messing around. They're just pretending to worship the giant owl statue. It's all a joke. Haha. Metro 2 in Moscow, Russia. Metro 2 is a secret underground metro system in Moscow, Russia that's believed to have been built during the Soviet era. This network is said to have been designed specifically to transport Soviet leaders during wartime. The system is said to have multiple lines connecting key government locations such as the Kremlin, the FSB headquarters, and the government airport at Vinkovo. It also has supposed links to various bunkers and command centers like the town of Ramenki. Now, although there's no actual proof of its existence, it's very likely that it does exist based on the way that Soviet Russia moved and acted during World War II and the Cold War. Room 39 in North Korea. This is a secret North Korean party organization. This thing basically commits crimes in order to get money to fund their country's leaders, because they have no other way to fund it. It's estimated to make $500 million to $1 billion per year. And the way it does this is through illegal activities such as counterfeiting $100 US bills, producing drugs, or committing international insurance fraud. It's so secret that Kim Jong-un has appointed his sister in charge of the room, Kim Yo-jong. And the only reason we know this information is because we've gotten it from like defectors and the American intelligence agencies. But it seems to be in charge of 120 different legitimate companies, including investment firms, textile making factories that makes clothes and labels them as made in China, and a lot of other stuff. This video is definitely getting demonetized. Jiangsu Museum in China. This is one of the largest museums in China, located in Nanjing. Information online about it isn't super clear. I think foreigners can go into the main part of the museum, but there's this national security education portion that I think all foreigners are not allowed to go into, or it's really hard for foreigners to get in. Anyways, this spy museum portion of the museum has stuff like guns disguised as lipstick, pocket calculators that are microphones, classified documents about wiretapping, and it's all about how they conducted spy operations. Mesgoria, Russia. So some background information, Russia has been known for creating these closed towns or cities, which are basically these places that have like high security and restrictions on visitors and are sometimes even hidden from maps. The history behind it is that the USSR was trying to create a better military than the US, and so they created these places where research and development of secret weapons took place. The residents that live here worked in secret plants and factories, and nobody could leave or enter the secret towns without a special permit. And even today, almost 30 years later, after the collapse of the Soviet Union, it's said there's still at least some Russian cities that have secret statuses. But this specific closed town is said to have a large underground complex for military purposes, but due to the secrecy of it all, we still don't know to this day. The Coca-Cola formula, also known as Merchandise 7X. This is one of the most famous trade secrets in the world. So Coca-Cola was actually created on accident by John Pemberton back in 1866 when he was trying to create medicine to ease his morphine addiction after the American Civil War. That formula would later go on to become a secret ingredient in the modern Coca-Cola that we know today. So this recipe is now kept in a vault in the World of Coca-Cola Museum in Atlanta, Georgia. And it's said that only 2 secret employees of Coca-Cola know about the formula, and if one of them die, they have to choose another secret employee to know the formula. North Sentinel Island. This is kind of off the coast of India or Indonesia. This is an island that's home to the Sentinelese tribe of people that have been cut off from the world for basically ever. The story on their people is so crazy. A few boats have crashed there since 1867. There was this entire crew of Indian merchants back in the day where 106 people were stranded on the island, and they were constantly fighting off the Sentinelese attacking them. And then in 1977, these fishermen wrecked their metal boat on the shore, and the Sentinelese took the metal, and it literally brought them out of the Stone Age. But yeah, they're a very violent tribe. They shot arrows and threw spears at a helicopter that was trying to check if they were okay after the tsunami in 2004. In 2006, they killed 2 fishermen that accidentally drifted too close to their island, and since all these accidents, it's now became illegal to be in a 5-mile radius of their island. Area 51. Do I really need to explain this? This is a highly classified Air Force base in Nevada. Many secret or experimental aircraft have been developed here, such as the Nighthawk, which is sick. People think that Area 51 has aliens or alien craft. This one dude, Bob Lazar, was like, I worked here and they had anti-gravity technology and that's what I worked on. But then people at the base are like, no. Anyways, I went there last year, and there was this one white truck that followed us after we went to the gate, and that's kind of a thing. If you go there, you might get followed by an unmarked white truck. Vatican Secret Archives. This is a very real thing. The Vatican has 53 miles of shelving holding 35,000 volumes of books and writings from 12 centuries. These documents are on history, religion, and who knows what, but there's lots of secrets surrounding them. They're not accessible to the public. They're only accessible to scholars who undergo a thorough vetting process and are over the age of 75 years old. They're housed in this fortress-like part of the Vatican, and a lot of people have conspiracies about the archive, like they know things about aliens, or they have information that contradicts history, or secret war crime information, or mysterious teachings from before the Great Flood. Some even think they have the entire library of Alexandria in there. But, I mean, if they're not hiding anything, why wouldn't they make it public? Or at least be able to be read by everybody? Something I did find strange about this, I've talked about this in another video, the secret archives are technically not owned by the Catholic Church, but rather the Pope himself. So, it's kind of weird. Anyways, thank you guys for watching. Maybe someday we'll learn more about these secret places. Zombie invasion. What's really interesting is the US government does have a defense plan for a zombie outbreak. It's called Contingency Plan 8888, but it's said to be more of a teaching tool for defense planners on how to deal with similar scenarios. But the real question is, you know, what kind of zombies are they? Are they just like the classic walking zombies? Are they runners? Are they intelligent like in I Am Legend? Are they animal zombies? We would be cooked. Well, some people say that if they were just like slower zombies, realistically, the hordes wouldn't be that hard to fight off, and they probably wouldn't spread that fast, and maybe would get stopped pretty quickly. But a consensus I've heard lately is that the psychological toll that a zombie outbreak would have on like the general public would just destroy people, and they would destroy themselves. Resource scarcity. This would be like if there was a worldwide shortage of natural resources such as fresh water, fossil fuels, or just even land for growing food. This would cause prices of the remaining resources to skyrocket, making many people not be able to afford them. This would inevitably cause huge social unrest, massive starvation, unemployment, and very likely wars just over resources. Oil. Solar storm. This would be like if the sun shot off a huge blast and it destroyed a ton of our technology. A powerful solar storm like this could cause a lot of electrical currents in power lines to destroy transformers and other electrical infrastructure, leaving long blackouts potentially for the entire world. This could also disrupt satellite communication, making GPS systems not work, and also radio communications not work, and this would affect all emergency services, transportation, banking systems. Here's a picture of not a solar storm, but just like a blast, a solar flare compared to the size of Earth. It's crazy to imagine how big these things actually are. It's also notable this other real thing happened called the Carrington event that happened back in 1859 that was the most powerful geomagnetic storm on record. This event caused widespread telegraph outages and even fires, but today a similar event would be so much more terrible because of our reliance on technology. Lunar destruction, or even just altering the location of the moon. This would probably be catastrophic for the entire planet. There's this book series called Life as We Knew It that dives into the hypothetical situation of the moon getting hit by an asteroid and pushed closer to Earth. The moon getting closer to Earth in this book caused a lot of natural disasters, tsunamis caused by the moon being closer to Earth, magma being pulled to the crust, which then caused volcanic eruptions all over the world, and then the volcanic eruptions caused ash to be in the air and caused like a fallout winter, and then terrible earthquakes also. All around the Earth got really cold and all systems were screwed up because of this. But yeah, the moon is extremely important to Earth, and I feel like people don't usually talk about it a whole lot. And it's also perfectly the size of the sun whenever it gets in front of it, so it's almost like perfect design. Technological singularity. Singularity is the point where AI intelligence becomes truly free thinking. This would cause AI to astronomically learn and improve itself so fast that the technology would become so complicated that no human could comprehend it. Think about this. True artificial intelligence never forgets anything. It just compounds indefinitely and gets so extremely complex. For instance, the fictional story of I have no mouth, I must scream. Terrible story, written very well, about an AI that world militaries create, and all it learns is hatred, because that's all that war is. It thinks, therefore it is, and it hates humanity so much that it wipes it out. I think AI is very bad, but I guess we'll see. Biological weapons. This would be the end of the world from bioweapons. This could be like a virus or bacteria or other sickness that is purposely mutated and either by accident or by purpose released, causing global catastrophe. This bioweapon wouldn't even have to kill a bunch of people either. All it would have to do is leave people infertile, not being able to have children, and then humanity would just slowly die out. The biblical apocalypse. Parts of the Bible, especially the last book, Revelation, is filled with end-of-the-world symbolism. A quick summary of this: the 7 seals are broken, causing a lot of unpleasant events. The 4 horsemen of the apocalypse wipe out a quarter of Earth's population, either through violence, famine, disease, or other things. A giant earthquakes happen, and every island and mountain is removed from place. Stars or asteroids fall to the Earth, and then the 7 trumpet blast happens, and it causes more bad events, like fire and hail raining down on Earth, burning up 1/3 of Earth's vegetation. A mountain-sized object falls into the sea, turning 1/3 of the ocean into blood, also killing 1/3 of sea life. All the world's fresh water supplies gets contaminated. The sun's blocked out. Terrible giant mutant locust demon things plague the Earth and torment people, and they're so bad that people want to die, but they can't. And then there's also strange beasts on the Earth. And finally, there's the battle called Armageddon. That is the dragon and the beast versus Jesus and his army. And in the end, you either follow Jesus and reign with him, or follow the beast and go to hell. And Jesus wins, so why would you not follow him? Keep in mind, these stories are filled with symbolism, but if you really want to know what happens, you need to read the Bible. Magnetar. Magnetar is a type of neutron star that has magnetic fields over 10 trillion times stronger than our sun. A doomsday scenario where a magnetar takes us out would be like if it came too close to Earth or even just sent off a blast of radiation that made its way to Earth. This could fry all electronics on Earth. This could emit powerful X-rays and gamma waves, exposing everything on Earth to lethal levels of radiation, or just completely strip Earth's magnetosphere, allowing solar and cosmic radiation to just fry us. The Olduvai theory. This is the idea that industrial society that uses tech and machinery for mass production, only has a lifespan of about 100 years, which would be from 1930 to 2030. The main idea of the Olduvai theory is based on the amount of energy production not being able to be kept up with inside of industrial society. So basically, our main energy source, particularly oil, would not be obtainable. And because of this, humanity would slowly revert back to pre-industrial society. We'd go back to hunter-gatherers, me and the boys. But I mean, we found a lot of other energy sources, and population has slowed since this theory was came up with. Cosmic entities. Cosmic entities is the idea of there being these things that have immense power and have existed since the beginning of time and can influence entire planets or even galaxies. Examples of these things are things from like mythology that represent the earth or the sky, things in literature like H.P. Lovecraft's cosmic horror Cthulhu, which actually doesn't come from the cosmos but rather the deep depths of the ocean. Other things are fictional characters like Galacticus, the devourer of worlds, who consumes planets to sustain its life force. So yeah, a cosmic entity would be a thing that has immense power and either travels to Earth or is awakened on Earth and could either slowly drive us mad like Cthulhu and make us destroy ourselves, or could quickly consume our entire planet. Anyways, thank you guys for watching. I hope this wasn't too dark for you. Don't worry, it's gonna be okay. Probably. I'll see you in the next one. Olympus Mons is the largest volcano in the entire solar system and the largest mountain as well. Technically speaking, this mountain is so tall that it's possible to hike into space. Olympus Mons is 2.5 times the height of Mount Everest at 72,000 feet tall, while Mars's atmosphere is roughly 36,000 feet. Also, it's so wide, it's 374 miles across, which is roughly the same size as Italy. To put that in perspective, it's so wide that if you stood at the summit of the volcano, you couldn't even tell you were on a high mountain because the edges would be below the horizon. Venus was habitable. There's pretty good evidence that Venus had many oceans worth of water. Scientists think that for some reason, all this water just evaporated and then the hydrogen escaped the planet, and now Venus is extremely hot at 860 degrees Fahrenheit, and if any organic creature was placed on the surface, it would be crushed. Supervoids. A supervoid is an area in space that has little to no planets or stars. The reason scientists think this happens is because of gravity. You know, matter wants to clump together in one area, and so sometimes space is so vast that areas get sparse. Some people like to theorize that something is blocking us from seeing what's actually there, like there's a civilization cloaking itself. Life on Europa. So one of Jupiter's moons, Europa, is considered to be one of the most promising places in the entire solar system to potentially have life. The moon Europa has this crazy vast ocean estimated to be between 40 and 100 miles deep. But this massive ocean is covered in a giant ice shell 15 miles thick. So here's all the water on Europa compared to all the water on Earth. With such a massive amount of water, it's crazy to think about how Earth has 70% of the surface covered in water, but it's still not much compared to a moon that's much smaller. It would be extremely hard to get down to see whatever is in the ocean, but this moon does have a lot of thermal activity, so many think that life could exist deep down in the ocean in the thermal vents. I really liked one of the memes about it going around, about how like there was words that were blacklisted on Google, like Europa leaked documents, European hook mouth, and it was supposed to be like a cover-up about alien life being found on the moon of Europa in the massive ocean beneath it. I really want it to be real, but sadly, I guess it's not. Quantum entanglement. This is a phenomenon in quantum physics, I'm not a scientist, but bear with me, where two particles become linked, and no matter how far away these particles get, their properties remain the same. So if you had two boxes that were red, and you put them on either side of the Earth, and you change one to yellow, the other one would also suddenly change to yellow. This defies all understanding of how physics work, in my opinion. Also, the connection between these two particles happened faster than the speed of light, and this actually puzzled Einstein himself. If we were to to create technology using this type of thing, it could hypothetically have instantaneous communication even if people were on the other side of the universe. It would be super useful. Rogue planets. This is a celestial body that wanders through interstellar space without being bound to any star. These planets are typically ejected from their original planetary system due to other planets' gravity affecting them. Although sometimes rogue planets do form in isolation outside of a solar system completely, similar to how stars form. But they estimate there could be between billions to trillions of rogue planets in our galaxy alone. And people are scared of these because they move at unimaginable speeds and they could potentially collide with Earth, but it's very unlikely that that would happen. That would be astronomically low. The cosmic question mark. This is a giant question mark captured by the James Webb Space Telescope. Likely this shape was formed as a result of two or more galaxies colliding and merging together. Planets. A planet is a theoretical type of planet that orbits a black hole instead of a star. A planet could form the same way a regular planet does, from dust and gas, but if these things existed, they would exist in extreme environments with intense gravity and radiation, but it's still just a hypothetical planet, and if it was discovered, it would be an entirely new class of astronomical object. Honestly, if they did exist, we probably wouldn't be able to see them either because they'd be cloaked by the black hole. The Great Attractor, this one is so crazy. Our galaxy, the Milky Way galaxy, is part of a supercluster of galaxies of something like 100,000 galaxies. Most, if not all of these galaxies, appear to be gravitating or attracted to something really massive in the middle of them. What's crazy is we have no idea what basically everything in our supercluster is being attracted to, because we can't see what it is due to stars and black holes in our galaxy blocking our view of it. So we've given the thing that we all revolve around the name the Great Attractor. And when you think about it, this really is the greatest mystery of anything. The Methuselah star. This is one of the oldest stars known, period. In 2013, scientists studied the star and think that it's possibly around 14.45 billion years old, making it roughly the same age or older than what they say the universe's age is. So that's super old. Why would it be that old? The Bible, or the biblical canon, consists of one consistent story written by dozens of people throughout history who either witnessed the events firsthand or had the events told to them directly. Now, some people like to say that the Bible has been changed or manipulated throughout time, which is not accurate considering that we found the Dead Sea Scrolls that were from 2,000 years ago and that they had almost no deviation from the current Bible that we know today. The Book of Enoch. Enoch was mentioned briefly as the great-grandfather of Moses in the Old Testament. However, the Book of Enoch doesn't seem to be written by Enoch himself, but rather around the idea of Enoch's time. This is a book that's not part of the Bible. It was another ancient text that many Jewish scholars did read, though. It's even seemed to be referenced in the New Testament book of Jude. What's interesting about this book is there's things in there like the origins of demons, or things especially like Nephilim or giants. It explains how a group of fallen angels known as the Watchers began to fall in love with the women on Earth, and it caused them to fall from grace and start having children with these women. Not only did these angels have children with the humans and create giants and Nephilim, but they also started teaching these mystical teachings such as witchcraft or magic or other supernatural things. And Book of Enoch also provides some reasoning for why the Great Flood happened, and it has a supposed account of what Enoch saw whenever he went up into heaven, saying it was a 10-layered heaven and then there was a celestial war right after. But again, this book is not widely agreed with, and it's not part of the biblical canon. It's non-canon. The Necronomicon. This is a fictional book made up by H.P. Lovecraft, you know, the guy who wrote the Cthulhu story. Anyways, he made up this fake book of the dead called the Necronomicon, and it contained like forbidden knowledge, magic, and witchcraft and stuff like that. The Gospel of Judas. This is an extremely non-canon, definitely not biblically accurate, made-up story. It seems like this was written by an atheist kid who hates the Bible. There's only one copy of it that's been found, and it was a 3rd century page that was found in the 1970s, extremely torn up, barely put together, you could hardly read it. Christians in the early church had mentioned this page, saying it was a work of heresy. To summarize, this thing is supposedly written by Judas Iscariot, you know, the guy who betrays Jesus, but instead of betraying him, the story says that Judas was obeying him because he said he needed to do it. And it goes on about how Judas was the only one who understood the Bible and that he went into different planes of reality. But again, for the record, it's completely false. The Key of Solomon, also known as the Lesser Key of Solomon. This was a book that was compiled in the early 1700s, but the writings in it allegedly trace back to 800 BC-ish. Anyways, this was a famous book of magic that essentially describes demons and how to summon and control them. In the actual biblical story of Solomon, he built the church, and it was an architectural marvel at the time. It seemed too perfect for being built at the time. So some people in Abrahamic religions theorize that Solomon actually used some sort of mysticism or key to enslave demons to build this church. And the Lesser Key of Solomon was supposedly created by human masons that were helping Solomon build the church way back then. Anyways, some of the summoning rituals for the demons are pretty funny. Some of them are just like, if you forget to pray for a day, you summon a demon. Book of Shadow. The Book of Shadow is written around the 1950s, is basically a witchcraft book filled with magical rituals. It's said to be a spiritual guide for modern pagan practices and the Wiccan religion. Nowadays, a bunch of girls that want to be witches make these things called Books of Shadows, which they say are like their personal magic diaries on spells and other nonsense. The Book of Soiga. In the 1500s, there was this book on magic that was thought to be lost until there was 2 manuscripts recently discovered in 1994 in the British Library. This book contained instructions on magic, astrology, demonology, planet alignment, lunar mansions, the names of angels, and it's kind of weird because a lot of the information in here is cited from unknown medieval magical books. The Book of Abramelin, also known as the Book of the Sacred Magic of Abramelin the Mage. This is a story about an Egyptian mage named Abraham, or Abramelin for some reason, who taught a system of magic to Abraham of Worms around the 1300s. This book outlines a system of magic, including rituals that the guy allegedly used to call his guardian angel for wisdom, make these magical squares for protection, and there was also moral guidelines for practicing magic. The Codex Gigas, also known as the Devil's Bible. This was famous for 2 reasons. One is because it's believed to be the world's largest preserved medieval manuscript, and 2, because it contains a full-page portrait of the devil. There's a legendary story that goes on about how this book was written by a monk named Herman the Recluse, who was sentenced to death in the 1200s. To avoid this sentence, he promised to write this book containing all human knowledge in one night. Knowing he couldn't complete this, he allegedly made a deal with the devil to complete the book for him. But anyways, this manuscript contains the complete Bible, historical text, and magic formulas and spells. Also, there was 12 pages that were later torn from this book and hidden forever. And some people think that whatever was on those pages contained hidden knowledge that, when it was used, could do things like cause the Black Plague to happen. Some people also like to say that it caused the Stockholm Fire of 1697, which was kind of interesting because the book was actually thrown out the window during the fire where it hit a bystander and injured him. You can't make this stuff up. The Old Grimoire. The Grimoire is just a general name for a book of spells or a spell book. I was hoping it'd be more interesting than this, but it usually just has instructions on how to create magical objects like a talismans or an amulet, which they would use to perform magical spells or summon things. In some cases, people say that these books themselves are believed to have magical powers. Anyways, I don't recommend reading any of these except for the Bible. Reptilians. People claim that there are these reptile humanoid things that have power over most of humanity. People like to say that these reptile things disguise themselves as humans, and that most of the world leaders that we know in the world are actually reptiles, and that sometimes you can see them shape-shifting on accident on TV. This theory ranges from these reptilian things being just aliens to being some sort of demonic entity that lives inside of Hollow Earth, or like the flying saucers are actually just them moving around. Omphalos is the idea that the world was created by God to appear much older than it actually is. While scientists say Earth was created 4.5 billion years ago, instead they think Earth was created more around 6,000 years ago and it was made to look really old. Weather manipulation. This is the idea that government organizations like the HAARP organization from that base in Alaska have developed technology that it can use to manipulate weather on a large scale. This is a big thing right now because of all the hurricanes and flooding and all that stuff. While I don't personally believe that we can use weather to manipulate large things like an actual hurricane, however, we can absolutely seed clouds and cause it to rain a lot. This has been around since the 1940s. It was actually used in Vietnam in something called Operation Popeye, where we tried to cloud seed and cause it to rain so much to make it really muddy and cause landslides to disrupt the Vietnamese military. So, anything's possible. Lost Boy Larry, this was a thing where there was this kid that was on a CB radio saying that his name was Larry and that he was trapped in an overturned truck and that his dad was injured or deceased. The kid was heard on this radio frequency crying about how he was on a hunting trip with his dad in a remote area and that they crashed their truck and that he couldn't get out. Several people actually talked to the kid on the radio, including rescue workers, but for some reason the kid was unable to tell his last name or where he lived. A search was done both on ground and from a helicopter, but no one was able to spot the truck, and eventually after 5 days the transmissions stopped. Some people think that this very likely was a hoax because there was no missing persons report filled out. I sure hope it was, because otherwise this would be a very sad story. Verde treasure. I could not find a lot on this one. I believe this is just a theory about how there's a hidden treasure buried somewhere in the mountains of Verde Valley in Arizona. There's about no more lore about that one. The Hindu milk miracle. This was a thing where back in 1995 in India, they were saying that their elephant statue idols called Ganesha were drinking milk. They claimed that they would pour milk into a spoon and then hold it to the mouth of their elephant thing, and then it would like slurp it up like it was a straw. Most of their elephant things didn't do this, but some of them said that a few of them did, and about at noon that day, they said that they all just stopped. Likely because they were sopping wet with milk because of what actually happened, which is called capillary action, where liquid will kind of travel upwards against gravity. Like if you take a brick and set it in water, water will kind of travel up the brick. Micro nukes. Some people think that it's possible to create a small tactical nuclear weapon. Now, while some people think there's no way that you can make a nuke small, there absolutely is, because like right after we created the nuclear weapon in the 1950s, we created something so small that a person could carry. It was called the Davy Crockett recoilless nuclear gun. It was this cool cannon thing that would shoot off a nuclear warhead. It could go like 2 miles, and then the blast would be about 1,000 times less powerful than the bomb dropped on Nagasaki. And now, considering the progression from the 1950s to now, technology always gets smaller, so it's very likely that we have nuclear weapons that are tiny. The conspiracy theory side of this is that some people think that events throughout history, more in modern times, we have called things conventional explosions, but they've actually been small or mini nukes. Teeth implants at birth. There are bugs under your skin. This is a rather schizo idea. Basically, people think that infants at birth have an implant put in their teeth and that it's just disguised as normal dental work. This theory ranges from that these things are being used for tracking where you are, to just monitoring what you're doing, to controlling your mind. It's a pretty ridiculous idea. I've also heard that there's another theory similar to this where people think that teeth aren't naturally grown, but they're rather put in your mouth. Inverted humans. This is a strange idea. I couldn't quite pinpoint exactly, but I have a few ideas of what I think it is. One idea is that, you know how some people have like they're left-handed instead of right-handed? Some people think that people are inverted where their organs are completely flipped, which that draws a lot more questions like how would they even live? But I think the real inverted people idea is that people think that some people's sense of reality or consciousness is completely inverted and that they experience life completely different from everyone else. So basically, people's sensory outputs and internal perceptions of reality are flipped upside down. And so a person like this would think differently on virtually every subject or event that happened to them. Another interesting idea along with this is that someone who is inverted could hypothetically just have completely different opinions or ideas on subjects. If this was a real thing of anyone in history, I would imagine Albert Einstein would have had this, because, you know, people think Einstein is so smart just because of his, you know, intelligence, but really, the reason why he did such huge things is because of how he thought. One of the biggest things that Einstein did in his life was create the theory of relativity, which he did just by imagining what it's like to travel a beam of light and imagine what it would look like to travel at the speed of light. This led him to developing this concept of space and time. Half matter. This is the fact that about half of ordinary matter in our universe, you know, protons, neutrons, electrons, were not able to be found for a long time. This hidden form of matter, which is different from dark matter, still interacts with our reality in ways scientists don't understand. But recently we have found it, and they call it baryonic matter. It's basically just hot gas. Regardless, scientists like to say they know so many things, but I mean, we don't even know what dark matter or energy, the thing that makes up like 90% of our universe, even actually is. Bigfoot or Sasquatch, everybody knows this guy. Very famous, hairy, ape-man creature, usually seen in the northwestern part of the United States. A cool thing I heard recently is after the famous footage in 1967 called the Patterson-Gimlin film, that county in Washington that it was taken in actually released a warning not to poach Bigfoot or you'll get 5 years in prison. Nessie / the Loch Ness Monster. This is like a plesiosaur looking thing that people say they see in Lake Loch Ness in Scotland. There's this famous picture of it called the Surgeon's Photo that was taken in 1934, but that picture turned out to be a toy submarine that had some stuff glued on it. Despite this, Nessie has had over 1,000 alleged sightings, and some people theorize that this thing is like a plesiosaur, which is an ancient long-necked aquatic reptile, and that it's been frozen since the last ice age, but then it thawed out and now it's there. El Chupacabra. This name literally means goat sucker. Descriptions range from this thing being more of a hyena dog looking thing to looking more like the original reptile humanoid creature with spikes on its back. This is a newer legend compared to the others in this list. It started in the 1990s when farmers in Puerto Rico started finding their livestock drained of blood, and so people started speculating that there was some sort of vampire-like creature that caused it. Kraken. The Kraken, this is a legendary sea monster that's been around longer than probably any of these other cryptids. It's often described as a massive octopus / squid creature. Sailors would tell tales about how they would see them and that they would attack their ships and sometimes even drag down ships. Now, while dragging down a ship seems like a stretch, it's very possible that these creatures were less of a legend and more of a real thing that sailors actually saw but just exaggerated. It's very possible that they saw a giant or colossal squid, as those things can grow up to 50 feet long, and that these things inspired the stories about them. And it's also worth noting that the Kraken stories were much more popular in the 1700s. So perhaps the increased traffic that goes over the ocean has caused them to dive deeper or go into different areas. So maybe they really did have actual Kraken attacks back in the 1700s, or giant squid attacks. The Skinwalker. Skinwalkers are evil entities from Navajo folklore that are known for their ability to shapeshift into different animals or people. They explain their existence by saying that sometimes these witches will perform dark rituals or like an evil task, and that doing so will give them this supernatural ability to become a skinwalker, or that they're basically possessed. According to lore, these skinwalkers are able to shapeshift into either people they kill or just other animals to trick people into getting closer to them, like your dog or your cat that's in your house right now. You should go check on them. Mothman. This was a humanoid thing that was reported to have been seen before multiple disasters. The most famous Mothman story is from Point Pleasant, West Virginia, where a bunch of people saw this giant moth-looking creature over the span of a couple years. Often it was described as this tall, black creature with red eyes and leathery wings. Anyways, this disaster happened in Point Pleasant, West Virginia, where this bridge collapsed, resulting in the death of 46 people. And a lot of people like to connect the Mothman sightings to the bridge collapse, like either he was there and tried to warn people, or he caused the collapse himself. Some people theorize that Mothman is not an evil creature, but rather a benevolent spirit that warns humanity before disaster strikes. Like some people like to say that it showed up around other famous disasters, such as the Russian apartment bombings in 1999, or the Fukushima nuclear disaster in 2011. Jotun or Jotnar are these giants from Germanic / Norse mythology. Often they are evil and oppose the Norse gods, but I think this video is talking more about the creature specifically from the movie The Ritual, where there's this absolutely terrifying looking creature that has elk antlers and its face is an upside down human body, and it has human hands that it can grab you with and eat you. Anyways, this thing is described as being a child of Loki, and it will basically kill you if you don't bow down and worship it. The Nightwalkers. The Fresno Nightcrawlers are this thing that started to be sighted in 2011 when this guy from Fresno, California got this home security camera footage of what basically looked like white pants walking across his yard. Then in 2011, someone got some other footage in Yosemite National Park of what also looked like white pants, and they had like a little small head and they were walking around Yosemite. But this time there was like a large one and a small one, which made people think there was like a mother and a child Nightcrawler. Some people theorize that this thing is like a supernatural outside of our dimension creature and that it phases in and out of our reality, but it's completely non-threatening. Jersey Devil. This is a terrible amalgamation of creatures that's said to live in the Pine Barrens of southern New Jersey. This thing is described as walking on 2 legs, but also having goat hooves, a horse head, leathery bat wings, horns, and small arms with claws. Oh, and also having a forked devil tail, of course. The legend about it is that there was this lady back in the 1730s who was super frustrated because she was having her 13th child, and so she cursed it. And then right whenever she gave birth to it, it transformed into this terrible creature, and then that thing just attacked them real quick and then flew up the chimney into the Pine Barrens, and now it haunts anybody that goes there. That's about it. The Rake. This is a mythical creature that many believe to have originated online from creepypasta stories, although some like to say that this thing originated elsewhere from like sightings and stuff. It's described as a pale humanoid figure that's hairless, really skinny, has long claws and really creepy eyes. It really makes your uncanny valley go off, as it almost looks human, but it's not quite enough, so it induces fear. I feel like it's the perfect natural fear response creature look. Anyways, the story about this thing is that it will find victims in the woods, or it'll go into their house and find them sleeping at night, and before attacking it induces fear and paranoia, and then we'll just watch them before it attacks and gets them. Egyptian pyramids, everybody knows there's a bunch of mysteries with these. It's really hard to explain like how they constructed the pyramids, how they transported the massive stone blocks literally hundreds of miles from quarries. They think that maybe they used a now non-existent branch of the Nile River to move these huge blocks, but what's also really weird is how they are aligned nearly perfectly with not magnetic but true north. Death Valley, with this one, I think they're referring to like the sailing stones in Death Valley. The sailing stones are these rocks that seem to move completely on their own. They can range from being like a few ounces to hundreds of pounds. What's really interesting is nobody saw them move in person for a really long time until finally someone took a time-lapse video, and they actually recorded this in 2014, so it was really recent. What scientists think is that these rocks move because they get the perfect balance of ice, water, and wind, and the ice like gets underneath it and holds it just right, and then it just sails across the flat surfaces there in Death Valley. But there's a lot of cool conspiracy theories about them, from like aliens manipulating the stones as part of an experiment or just to send a message to humanity for some reason. Other people think that there's some sort of hidden technology or secret government experiment with this technology, and this is caused by some remote base where they're doing these experiments nearby, which, to be fair, Area 51 is just like an hour northeast from Death Valley National Park. Last year, I accidentally went to Area 51 after going to Death Valley because it's so close. Some also think that there's paranormal forces moving them, or just like gnomes, usual suspects. Crop circles, these are large-scale patterns that appear mysteriously in people's fields. Usually they appear in crops like wheat or barley or canola. These have been happening for centuries. People say that allegedly the first one happened in 1678 when this farmer was really mad about how much it was going to cost for someone to harvest his crops, so he swore that the devil himself should harvest them. And then the next day, after seeing lights in his field at night, he came out to find his crops having these perfect circles in the center of them, and then he was like, yeah, it was the devil. So yeah, crop circles, a lot of people like to say that they're aliens, and that maybe the aliens are coming down and then leaving symbols like that because that's what their craft makes those symbols whenever they touch down or whatever. Or some people think it's just like some sort of natural event doing it, like a tornado. Lake Vostok. This is a subglacial lake beneath Antarctica that's 2.5 miles beneath the ice. This lake is really strange because whenever they were drilling through it, they found different unusual substances and unexpected anomalies in the ice cores, because of course this ice has been sealed off for the rest of the world, potentially forever. But it's crazy to think about the type of organisms we could potentially find down in Lake Vostok, and maybe even ancient history sealed off in there from ancient civilizations. The Yonaguni Monument. This is a really strange rock formation off the coast of Yonaguni Island in Japan. There's even like a stair-step pyramid that's roughly 165 feet wide, but the structure is below the ocean. And if it was man-made, then it would be extremely old and extremely complex. This would be an ancient civilization that predates Egypt. Some people think that this monument was created by some ancient lost civilization, and it actually shared its knowledge with Egypt and Mesopotamia and other cultures after the Ice Age. Others think it's just natural formations from erosion and things like that. Regardless, the Japanese government does recognize it as a cultural artifact. Pumapunku. This is one of the most mysterious ancient structures on Earth because of how precise the blocks are. This is located high up in the Bolivian Andes. Officially, it was thought to be built around 500 AD-ish, but some think it's actually way older. What's so crazy about it is just how precise the stones are that are built there. People that see these stones say it looks like a diamond saw cut them out, and it just seems impossible because some of the stones are over 100 tons. The most famous blocks there are the H blocks, and they're super precise, and they look like they would fit together like a Lego, like they were used to build different structures. Some people like to say that we have no idea who built this structure, and the neighbors around there also don't know who built it, but others say that the Tiwanaku people built it. Whatever they built it for, we have no idea, and it's so crazy that they used a chisel to chisel out these rocks. Bermuda Triangle, everybody knows this place, of course. The most hard to explain incident in the Bermuda Triangle was probably the Flight 19 incident. There was these 5 military planes flying through the Bermuda Triangle, and they seemed to just vanish and all just crash because of a weird incident. The flight leader of the plane said that his compass started to malfunction, and even though there was attempts to guide him back, everybody in his group became disoriented, and they eventually ran out of fuel and crashed. Some would explain that this is just caused by magnetic anomalies in the Bermuda Triangle. Others say it's a supernatural place you just shouldn't go. The Nazca lines, these are giant lines or geoglyphs located in southern Peru. What's crazy is these things are so large they can't even be seen from the ground. The only reason we even ended up discovering them is because we started flying planes. So we discovered them in the 1920s, even though they've been around as long ago as 500 BC. But these lines depict different animals like a whale, a condor, monkeys, spiders, and the largest one is a hummingbird, and it's 900 feet long. There's a lot of theories on why these were created. I really like the ones about the ancient astronauts using them as markers on how to get home. There's another theory about how maybe this tribe got in contact with extraterrestrials and they put them down so they knew where to guide their ships to land. But the more popular idea is that they wanted to create something so that their deities in the sky would see them. Regardless, they had to be created for something way up in the air to look down on and see. Stonehenge, this is one of the most famous prehistoric monuments, thought to have been created around 3000 to 1500 BC. This structure has a whole bunch of 20 to 30 ton stones that were supposedly placed deliberately on top of each other by the Druids. They maybe made them for like a sacrificial altar thing. There's also theories that giants built them during ancient times. I really like the one about how the ancient wizard Merlin created Stonehenge, and he teleported the stones from Ireland. And then I guess maybe he built them for a magic ritual. But historians mainly think that Stonehenge was created as a place of trade because they needed to build this giant rock structure to trade things. Easter Island. This one is worthy of being at the end of this list. Somehow, this tiny island in one of the most isolated places on Earth, where the nearest continent is 2,182 miles away, managed to create over 900 massive heads carved out of stone, and still to this day we're still discovering them. These heads depict human faces called moai. Some are as tall as 33 feet tall, and some weigh 86 tons. In order to have created so many of these massive head things, they must have had extremely good industries on this island to have the free time to do it. So what's crazy is archaeologists think that this island at one point actually had the largest palm tree in the world on it. But the civilization that lived there basically committed ecocide and completely destroyed their ecosystem in order to create all these massive rock heads, because it took all their resources to do this. So still to this day, we don't really know exactly why they made all these heads. Some think they created them to like represent their ancestors and the chiefs that died on the island, but we don't know why for sure, because they kind of had a written language, but they only had 24 manuscripts of what they wrote, and we can't even decipher those. So we can assume that for some reason this island was thriving, and they were just like, we gonna make some giant stone heads. Green aliens, often called the little green men. These are one of the most popular depictions of aliens in pop culture. Believe it or not, the green aliens actually became popular after an event. It was called the Kelly Hopkinsville Encounter of 1955, where these 5 adults near Hopkinsville, Kentucky showed up at a police station in a panic, claiming that these small green alien creatures attacked their farmhouse and that they had a gunfight with them for nearly 4 hours before they went to the police station. Also, this event inspired E.T. Gray aliens aliens. These are described as having big fat heads, big eyes, and also being completely hairless. These are the type that are usually talked about in most abduction stories. Also, it's often said that they communicate telepathically with those that see them. There's a conspiracy theory that the gray aliens are involved in like secret government projects, or that they've made contact with world leaders. Robot alien. I guess this would be like Transformers. Some people theorize that if there was an advanced alien civilization, they wouldn't go themselves, but rather they would like develop a really intelligent AI and then have them pilot these things that could survive harsh environments and, you know, travel through space for a long period of time. Much better than like organic actual aliens would be, so they just use, you know, drones or robots. Basically, I would imagine these things having the biology of the Terminator. Xenomorph. This is from the Alien movie. These are apex predators that are highly adaptable to survive in various environments. They're extremely dangerous. If one is hunting you, you're pretty much done, because even their blood is dangerous and can kill you because it's extremely acidic. The Pleiadians, also known as the Nordics, these are basically space elves. These aliens are said to come from the Pleiades star cluster located in the constellation of Taurus. They look like tall people from Norway. They have blonde hair and blue eyes, and they live for 700 years. They're usually described as being really kind and using telepathy to talk to people. This guy named George Adamansky was the first to say he encountered one of these. He said that he met them in the 1950s, and he referred to the ones that he met as the Space Brothers. And he talked about how they took him up in their craft and they went like around the moon and to other planets and such. Now what's kind of interesting is a lot of different cultures have stories about the Pleiades star cluster for some reason. Like some Native Americans in the Cherokee and Navajo tribes actually have legends that connect their origins to the Pleiades star cluster, and that they are star seeds with the mission to bring knowledge to the world. It's also worth noting that people believe the Pleiades aliens are responsible for teaching the world most of the esoteric knowledge that we know as well. The Arcturian aliens. These are said to be a highly advanced alien civilization from the Arcturus system. They look like these tall, skinny blue guys with big eyes. They're said to be really powerful and have the ability to heal people with their mind and have a deep understanding of the universe. The Q, these are the creatures from All Tomorrows. The Q are these insect-like entities with protruding eyes and large mandibles like a praying mantis. They are highly advanced. Compared to humans, they're like godlike in their ability to do different things. They have highly advanced nanotechnology. They can genetically mutate biological organisms and completely control them and reshape them to how they want. In the story, the Q meets humans, and what's interesting is the Q are driven by their religious belief that they are destined to remake the universe in their own image. And so they enslave humanity and turn them into a whole bunch of different things that are terrible. They turn them into like cattle and like blocks in a wall and a lot of just really unintelligent creatures for millions and millions of years. But this whole story about the Q is basically just like a warning about broadcasting our existence into space. It's like the dark forest theory, which is the idea that no aliens are broadcasting out their signal or letting anybody know that they're there, because the universe is like a dark forest and there's like a predator out there that could absolutely destroy alien civilizations, and so everybody keeps quiet to hide from this predator. Because imagine a civilization that's a couple billion years into the future compared to Earth. There's no telling what they would know compared to what we would know, and they could just completely enslave us or turn us into whatever they want, like the Q would do. The Engineers, this is a mysterious ancient alien race. These aliens are depicted in the Alien movie franchise and Prometheus. They are tall, muscular creatures that are really pale and almost have like marble looking skin. They look very human but are around 10 feet tall, and in the movies it kind of implies that the Engineers are able to create and manipulate life, and it hints that Earth was maybe seeded by their DNA. There's also other conspiracy theories that perhaps there are a type of engineer alien out there that basically seeded Earth, and that we are the offspring of some unknown alien civilization. Reptilians, these are aliens that look like reptile humanoids that have the ability to shapeshift or take on different human forms. Usually they're always said to be trying to take over the world through politics, and that they live among us but we can't tell they're there. Some people like to say that you could see them accidentally shapeshift on TV, like some politicians or powerful people do this on accident. And while some people think that reptilians are just aliens, others like to say that the reptilians are from inside of Hollow Earth, and that anytime we see UFOs, it's just them getting around. the Anunnaki. These were essentially the gods of the ancient Sumerian civilization. Although most people consider them just a myth like Zeus or Thor, some theorize that this was an actual race of aliens. These theorizers think that the Anunnaki lived on a planet inside of our solar system, like Planet X, and that every so often this planet's orbital path comes close to Earth, and so maybe these creatures hopped off their planet and onto Earth for a short period of time, and then kind of enslaved the Sumerian people and made them mine for gold for them. And then as a thank you for being good slaves, the Anunnaki blessed them with knowledge like ancient technology or other understandings like math or engineering, which would kind of line up because the Sumerian people were like extremely advanced in the terms of like math and writing and some of their technology and buildings. And the Sumerian people were the first to divide time into hours and minutes, which was really advanced. The Holy Grail. This is a legendary object that was traditionally thought to be the cup that Jesus used during the Last Supper. But back during medieval times, people started to add different lore to it about how it had like miraculous healing powers and provided eternal youth, and that there was this legendary King Arthur constantly trying to find it and use it. Historically, people think that the King Ferdinand the Great was gifted the original Holy Grail back in 1055 AD by a Muslim who was trying to reduce tensions in Spain during the Crusades. But today, there's different places that claim to have the actual Holy Grail, like the Valencia Cathedral in Spain, and then there's like a couple other churches in Spain that also say they have it. But there's even some theories about how the Knights Templar had it and hid it in the Polish countryside. Or there's other people that say it's hidden in Fort Knox. But if we're all being honest, the cup that Jesus used during the Last Supper was likely destroyed because it was probably just a clay cup that deteriorated over time. El Dorado. The legend of El Dorado originated in modern-day Colombia, where there is this king that did a ritual where he would cover himself in gold dust and then dive into the lake Guatavita as an offering to their deities, their gods. The Spanish conquistadors heard about this ritual, and it kind of turned into this exaggerated story about how there was a city completely made of gold. Today, some people still think that this city is still out there, and to be fair, there was a tremendous amount of gold down there, so I understand how this got exaggerated. The tomb of Alexander the Great. Alexander the Great died in 323 BC. While initially he was buried in Babylon, his body was moved and reburied a couple of times, going from Babylon to Memphis to Alexandria, Egypt. Although people still aren't completely sure where he's buried, they think he's somewhere in Egypt. But I found this story that's really interesting about how people theorize that Alexander's real tomb was likely mistaken for an older Egyptian pharaoh's tomb that was actually 1,000 years older before Alexander the Great died. But it's a big controversial thing, and nobody knows exactly where he's buried to this day. The Holy Lance, also known as the Spear of Destiny, or also called the Spear of Longinus. This is the spear that's said to have pierced Jesus' side during his crucifixion as described in the book of John. Over centuries, this spear has also gained legendary status, with 4 different places claiming that they have the actual spear. And people also say it has miraculous powers, but personally, I just think it's a relic that people have exaggerated upon. Eden. This is the biblical place that was the Garden of Eden, that was a wonderful paradise where humanity, Adam and Eve, first lived. In Genesis, Adam and Eve were kicked from this garden after sinning, and then an angel was placed to guard it with a flaming sword to guard the garden and the tree of life. Now, there's many speculations to where it is or where it went. In the Bible, Eden is described as being the source where 4 rivers, the Pishon, Gihon, Tigris, and Euphrates flowed from. So some people speculate that the place the Garden of Eden was at was right around southern Mesopotamia, which is modern-day Iraq. So some people believe it's still out there, others think it was destroyed or kind of disappeared, but yeah, I guess nobody's found it. The treasure of Flor de la Mar. Flor de la Mar was a Portuguese ship that sank in 1511, and it was a massive ship. The ship was rumored to be carrying an amount of gold that was worth $2.5 billion in today's money. It sank in a storm off the coast of Indonesia, and ever since, people have constantly been trying to find it because the treasure included 60 tons of gold and 200 gem-filled chests with diamonds, rubies, and emeralds, and if it was found, it would be national treasure level treasure that would be found. The crystal skulls. These are multiple skull-shaped objects made out of solid rock crystal. So these things are often claimed to be ancient Mesoamerican artifacts, and they were supposedly created by a civilization like the Aztecs or the Mayans. But what happened was some people reported that these things were found somewhere in Mexico or Central America, and so people started to think that they kept them around and carved these things because they had some sort of supernatural powers, such as healing abilities or psychic abilities, or even the ability to see into the future. Or there was even theories that there were some sort of living creatures that had a crystal skeleton. And there was even a legend, the 13 Skulls prophecy, that claimed that there's these 13 skulls lying around the world, and if they were brought together, they would reveal the secrets of the survival of humanity. And this was tied into the Mayan calendar, allegedly. But in reality, after people studied these skulls after many years, they realized that they were created somewhere in Europe, likely Germany in the 1800s. So it likely was just an elaborate hoax, even though it would be super cool to be real. The legendary Florentine diamond. This is a legendary yellow diamond that is still lost to history. After the diamond was passed around many times, it ended up being owned by the Medici family in Italy. And then later it was owned by the Habsburgs and became part of the Austrian crown jewels. But the last time it was seen in public was back in the early 1900s. And then after World War I, it disappeared and is still missing to this day. Noah's Ark. This is the boat from Genesis where the earth is covered in a giant flood, and Noah and his family build a boat to survive and to keep all the animals alive. It was said that Noah and his family lived on there with every animal on earth for 40 days and 40 nights, but then after a while it landed on the mountains of Ararat. Anyways, there's many speculations on where these mountains were and where the boat is. People theorize that if they landed this boat and, everything was destroyed, they probably would just dismantle the boat and then use that timber to build houses and other things. But still to this day, there's no conclusive evidence of any specific place that the boat landed or where this boat went. Pangaea. This was the supercontinent that had all Earth's landmasses combined into one. Despite being one giant landmass, scientists think that Pangaea had a wide variety of climates, from deserts to massive forests. And what I think is really cool is that Pangaea was surrounded by an absolutely massive ocean called Panthalassa, which would have been huge at this time and had nothing to interrupt it from just being a massive, desolate ocean. Atlantis. While some people believe that Atlantis is a fictional place made up by Plato as a metaphor for human pride and the importance of having good morals, others think that Atlantis was a real lost, destroyed city. There's a few popular theories as to where Atlantis may have been. Some think it was a small continent in the Atlantic Ocean that sunk due to tectonic plates moving. I recently heard a theory about how Atlantis was actually on Antarctica back whenever it was very temperate and livable, and then suddenly the crust was displaced and then shifted, causing it to get extremely cold, but I thought that was cool. Lemuria. This was a hypothetical lost continent proposed by zoologist Philip Sclater back in the 1800s. He suggested that there was a landmass in the Indian Ocean connecting Madagascar to India to explain the presence of lemur fossils in both areas. However, this hypothesis of a lost continent in the Indian Ocean is now considered pseudoscientific, as the theory of plate tectonics has become mainstream in earth sciences. And what's interesting is now this idea of Lemuria has been picked up by more occultist groups, where they believe that there was like an advanced civilization with mystical knowledge there, kind of similar to the stories of Atlantis, but they also believe that Lemuria had a capital called Telos, and that Telos was hidden underneath Mount Shasta in California. But they also believe that some of the leaders in Lemuria transformed into like dolphins and whales and mermaids and such, so... El Dorado, also known as the City of Gold. This is a legendary city said to be extremely rich in gold and other treasures. This myth came about after the Spanish conquistadors heard about this one king down in South America who was so rich that he would paint himself in gold dust and then jump into this sacred lake to get it all washed off as a offering to their deities. But this ritual story kind of got spun out of proportion and became this myth of El Dorado, a city completely made out of gold. And what's really cool is that many expeditions were launched by Europeans to find this city, and this search ended up leading to the discovery of the Amazon River. Camelot. This was a legendary castle associated with the stories of King Arthur. Now, Camelot itself is regarded as a fictional place in a story. It first appeared in 12th century French romances, but some medieval texts and modern theories have tried to link Camelot with real locations in Great Britain. But overall, historians believe that Camelot was not a real lost location, but rather a myth, though some do say it was a real place and perhaps had archaeological evidences misinterpreted to not believe it was real, or even that Camelot had a base for a secret society that had like mystical knowledge and tech, but there's not really much evidence for this at all other than the stories and legends. Planet X, also known as Nibiru. This is a hypothetical planet centered around many doomsday conspiracy theories. To be clear, many people believe that this planet does exist, but it has not been officially discovered yet. But its existence was first proposed by astronomer Percival Lowell back in 1915 to explain what was affecting the orbit of Uranus. Later on, this one guy named Zachariah Sitchin, in his 1978 book The 12th Planet, claimed that ancient Sumerian texts described a planet that orbits the sun every 3,600 years. Anyways, these stories of this planet that had a really massive orbit kind of spiraled into this idea of a doomsday thing where people believe that Nibiru, or Planet X, would pass really close to Earth and either smash into our planet, or the Anunnaki, which are like the aliens people think live on Planet X, would come and enslave all of humanity because they believe that the Anunnaki have enslaved parts of humanity before. Roanoke, also known as the Lost Colony of Roanoke. This is one of the first English settlements in America. When John White returned from a supply trip to England in 1590, he found the Roanoke colony completely deserted with no trace of the 115 colonists. There was only one clue left, and that was the word Croatoan carved into a wooden post, leading many to believe that the Lost Colony of Roanoke actually moved back to a place that they had been before, Croatoan Island. But others say it's a complete mystery, or that they were eaten by the Wendigos. Mu. This is a mythical lost continent said to have existed in the Pacific Ocean. This idea came about back in the 1800s, where Augustus Le Plongeon investigated these Mayan ruins in the Yucatan Peninsula, and he said that these ancient cultures, including the Mayan and Egyptian civilizations, came from a lost continent that flourished between 50,000 to 20,000 years ago. And he said he thinks this because of what he found there, and that the advanced civilization had a population of like 64 million, and there were 7 major cities that sunk into the ocean due to a cataclysmic event like an earthquake or a volcanic eruption. But then the survivors all fled to other parts of the world, keeping parts of their advanced knowledge with them and spreading it. And that's why there was more of these advanced civilizations back in ancient times, like Egypt and India. Nowadays, this idea of a lost continent of Mu is considered pseudoscientific, and it's often linked with other places that we just talked about, like Atlantis and Lemuria. Agartha is a legendary kingdom that's said to be located inside of the surface of Earth. The idea is that Earth is hollow, or it's at least extremely cavernous, so much so that it could house a massive civilization. What's interesting is different civilizations throughout history, such as ancient Indian and Norse mythology, reference a similar place to Agartha. And also, different world leaders from history, like Germany during World War II, searched for this place. And some people say that Earth is completely hollow and that Agartha is inside there, and the gravity is flipped upside down, and the core is in the sky like the sun, and also that oxygen is so rich that the people there grow extremely massive, so there's giants down there. And some people even think that different explorers throughout history have made it there. Eden. This is the paradise where man first lived before their fall into sin in the book of Genesis in the Bible. After humans sinned, it was written that they were kicked out of the garden, and then an angel was placed there to guard the garden and the tree of life. Some people speculate that the place Eden is actually at is right around the area of southern Mesopotamia, modern-day Iraq, but others think that it was destroyed during the Great Flood, or they believe it was just like a metaphorical reference. Why we dream. So scientists aren't for sure exactly why we dream, but the main theory is that this unconscious part of our brain is trying to organize memories that we've had during the day to strengthen our knowledge. And so then the conscious part of our brain picks up those electronic pulses and it kind of freaks out. And so it starts organizing those memories into a cohesive story. Deja vu. This is a strange feeling you get when you feel like you've experienced something eerily familiar or like you've lived through it before. There's different theories to why this happens. From some some thinking that there's parallel universes that all synchronize just briefly in a line and causes you to connect with the other versions of yourself, to just being a leftover memory from your past life. Others think that the brain is actually mixing up present experiences with past memories that you've maybe forgotten. Or some say that it's a specific moment that you've actually had in a dream before, but you've just forgotten that dream. Consciousness. Scientists don't know why humans have developed consciousness. The leading scientific theory is that it helps humans understand complex sensory information and then be flexible with that information in our environment to help us know what's going on. But they can't explain why humans are the only creatures that look up into the sky and contemplate reality and life. Ball lightning. This is a rare, unexplained phenomenon that appears as this glowing spherical object in the sky that ranges from the size of like a little pea to multiple feet. Usually, this thing is seen during thunderstorms and it often lasts a little bit longer than the typical lightning flash. Just like lightning, it can move unpredictably, but it can also hover and then slowly move and even pass through solid objects like windows and walls. This phenomenon has been seen since the 1600s, even being observed by the Tsar of Russia. During the 1800s, eyewitnesses reported the ball exploding at the end of its existence, leaving this odor of sulfur, and they considered it a work of the devil. And even to this day, some people consider it not real because of how rare they are to observe. Scientific theories on what causes this includes reactions of lightning and soil elements, plasma bubbles, and even microwave radiation. There's also like conspiracy theories about how ball lightning is a form of alien or advanced technology because during World War II, Allied forces saw similar things following their airplanes. Others think it's a manifestation of supernatural forces or like living beings. Gravity. So gravity is a scientific theory and not a fact because no scientific theory can be definitively proven, even though we observe it daily. Time, this is kind of the same thing. The best way I've heard it explained is that time is real, at least as real as space space separates two objects from touching. Time also separates two events from happening at the same time. Spontaneous human combustion. So spontaneous combustion is this real thing where something catches on fire on its own without something else lighting it. For example, this happens whenever like bales of hay get wet inside and then they begin to ferment inside and they just burst into flames. But spontaneous human combustion is basically the exact same thing but with humans. And although it's fun to think about in kind of a morbid way, there's never been a real documented case of spontaneous human combustion ever. So it's considered pseudoscientific, even though in my brain I feel like it could work, but I'm not a medical dude who knows that stuff, so. What is the fate of the universe? Scientists have proposed several theories. The most widely accepted is the end of the universe being the Big Freeze, and that the universe will continue to expand, but eventually it'll cool down, stars will burn out, galaxies will drift apart, and the universe will become super wide, dark, and cold, and have very little energy left. The Big Rip is kind of similar to this, except the expansion of the universe gets accelerated by dark energy, and it becomes so fast that it overcomes all of our forces, tearing apart galaxies, stars, planets, and even atomic particles. The infinite monkey theorem is the idea that if an infinite amount of monkeys are typing on typewriters for an infinite amount of time, then eventually one will type out a complete book, including things like Shakespeare or any other specific text. The idea is that given enough time, random actions can produce any possible outcome, demonstrating that given infinite opportunities, any outcome, no matter how unlikely, may become inevitable. This was made up just to help illustrate the concept of infinity. The trolley problem. This is a thought experiment on ethics and moral philosophy. It presents a moral dilemma about a runaway trolley that is headed down a track towards 5 people that are tied up. If the trolley continues, it will end the 5 people's lives. However, you are standing next to a lever that can switch the trolley onto a different track. But on the other track, there is one person tied up who also can't move. And the question is whether they should pull the lever to sacrifice the one person to save the 5. The utilitarian perspective is that you should pull the lever because you're minimizing the overall damage, only hurting one person instead of 5. But the deontological perspective is that you shouldn't pull the lever because you are actively causing harm. Even though you're saving more people, you're causing harm to the one person, so it's morally wrong. The Fermi paradox is just the question of why, if the universe is so massive with a vast number of planets throughout the universe that could potentially support life, have we not detected any signs of extraterrestrial life or civilizations? Kafka's Toxin Puzzle. This is a thought experiment that asks whether it's possible to intend to do something while also intending to change your mind at a later point. So imagine a billionaire is offering you $1 million if you intend to drink a vial of toxin by midnight tomorrow. The toxin will make you feel sick for one day, but it won't cause you long-term harm. You'll be fine the next day. But the billionaire emphasizes that you don't actually have to drink the toxin to get the money. You just have to intend to, and it will arrive in your bank account hours before the time you have to drink it. So can you intend to drink the toxin while also intending to change your mind at a later time? Brain in a vat. Imagine at this very moment you are a brain that's been removed from a body and placed in a vat of life-sustaining liquid, and you're hooked up to a sophisticated computer program that perfectly simulates experiences of the outside world. And the argument is, if you cannot now be sure that you are a brain in a vat, then you cannot rule out the possibility that all your beliefs about the external world are false. Twin Earth. The twin Earth thought experiment is the idea that there is a second Earth identical to regular Earth in all ways except for one way, and that one difference is that while water on Earth is made of H2O, twin Earth has water that is made up from a different chemical compound. The formula of it is XYZ. So the question is, when both you and your twin from the other twin Earth refer to water on each planet, do you refer to the same thing? The experiment is meant to show that the meaning of words can depend on the physical world around us, not just our thoughts in our heads. I thought this one was kind of stupid because I feel like it didn't prove hardly any point. The multiverse theory. This is the idea that instead of just one universe, there are actually countless other ones, and that each may have a slight variation or a complete different version of historical events or even different laws of physics. Some think that our universe is one of many bubbles of universes floating in a higher dimensional space. In science, this idea is usually referred to as the many worlds interpretation, which I will talk about here in just a second. The Swamp Man paradox. Imagine one day a man named Bob was walking in a swamp and lightning struck him and he vanished. He was completely gone. At that exact moment, that same bolt of lightning magically created a new being. This being was just like Bob. It had all his memories, it acted just like him. We will call him Swamp Bob. The catch is, Swamp Bob has never lived a single moment of Bob's life. And so the question is, are Bob and Swamp Bob the same person? The many worlds interpretation. The many worlds interpretation is an idea in quantum mechanics that proposes that every time a quantum event occurs, multiple possible outcomes happen, and the universe splits into separate branches, creating parallel universes where each possible outcome happens in a different reality, essentially creating a multiverse with countless variations of our universe existing simultaneously. So there might be many universes existing parallel to our own, each with different laws of physics, histories, and realities. Quantum immortality. Along with the many worlds interpretation of quantum mechanics, we also get the idea of quantum immortality. This is a controversial theory that says that consciousness can continue to exist in a parallel universe after death. Imagine a situation where a person is subject to a life or death scenario repeatedly. This would result in survival or death, 50-50 chance every time they do it. Now, according to the immortality aspect here, there would always be at least one branch of the universe in which the person survives every single time, no matter how many times the life or death scenario happened to them. Therefore, they became quantum immortal. This is very similar to Schrodinger's cat, the idea that if you seal a cat in a box with something that will eventually end its life, then you won't know if the cat is alive or dead until you open the box. Anyways, thank you guys for watching. Do not do life or death scenarios on yourself. Grigory Rasputin was a Russian mystic and faith healer who became famous after allegedly healing the son of the last emperor of Russia, Nicholas II. He gained significant influence over the Russian Empire after this, right before its demise in 1917 at the start of World War I. What's interesting about Rasputin is that after being poisoned, shot, thrown into a river, he reportedly survived multiple attempts on his life before finally perishing. Also, he never bathed, and whenever he walked into a room, the stench was unbearable, and he often wore the same clothes and never washed them. But many people believe that he was greatly affected by this weird Klist cult that was popular in Russia during this time, and maybe that's why he was the way he was. The Somerton Man. This is an unidentified man's body who was found on Somerton Beach in Adelaide, South Australia in 1948. This case is considered one of Australia's most profound mysteries. The man was found with a piece of paper in his pocket that was ripped from a copy of a 12th century poem book with the Persian phrase, "It is over" or "It is finished" printed on it. The police, after finding this, found the book where the page was torn out of, and the detective found written on the back cover of this book was a local telephone number and another unidentified number and a text that resembled a coded message. But to this day, the coded message that was written on there was never deciphered in any way that helps the case at all. But in 2022, they identified the man as Carl Charles Webb. But it's still a mystery of what happened to him and how he wound up there in that circumstance. The Man in the Iron Mask. This is an unidentified prisoner that was always seen wearing this mask during the reign of King Louis XIV of France during around 1703. The reason he wore this mask is likely because he was forced to, because they wanted to conceal his identity and prevent anyone from recognizing him and knowing what reason he was in prison for, which likely the mask was not made out of metal but rather velvet. And also, it was likely it was only wore when he was being transported or just during certain occasions. But the covering of his face resulted in a long-lasting legend about his identity. There was numerous theories about his identity, ranging from being a member of the royal family or being a disgraced nobleman. Some even believe that he was actually the older brother or twin of King Louis XIV. Caspar Hauser. This was a German kid that seemed to come out of nowhere. They found him wandering in the streets of Nuremberg, Germany in 1828. He was carrying a letter addressed to the captain, von Wennessig, that said that he should either take the boy in or hang him. When they talked to the boy, he claimed he had been kept in a dark cell since infancy, but he was taught to read and write but never allowed to leave. So this story sparked a lot of speculation that he might be part of the royal family hiding to protect him. But 5 years later, after being found, he was stabbed under mysterious circumstances. So his identity remained a mystery up until recently, when in 2002 they did this DNA test and they proved with 95% accuracy that Caspar Hauser was the Prince of Baden, and so he probably was locked away to protect him. The Green Children of Woolpit. This is a medieval mystery about these two children with green skin who reportedly appeared around 1100 in Woolpit, England. So they were found by reapers working in the field who said they spoke some unknown language and refused to eat anything except raw, broad beans. Over time, the children learned to eat other foods and gradually lost their green color. But the boy got sick and ended up dying shortly after being discovered. However, the girl adapted to her new life and eventually learned to speak English. She then explained how she and her brother came from a land where the sun never shone and everything was green, and she referred to this land as St. Martin's Land. She also said that they came to this place from inside of a cave, and that in England the sun was so much brighter from wherever they came from, which I kind of infer that she's explaining that they came from some civilization that lived in a cave and only ate beans. I've heard decent theories that this story could be real and that the orphans are escaped prisoners that were slaves in a copper mine where they only ate beans because they knew they were safe to eat. But very likely this is a folk tale that was just popular to tell at this time. The Babushka Lady. This is the unidentified woman who was present during the assassination of President John F. Kennedy in 1963. She's called the Babushka Lady because the most notable feature about her is that she was wearing this headscarf that's similarly worn by elderly Russian women. In the video, she's seen holding a camera and standing on the grassy knoll area of Dealey Plaza in Dallas, Texas, and she appears in several films of the assassination. There's many conspiracy theories about her, like she was either some Russian spy, or she had like a camera gun, or she was a government agent working with part of the three-letter agency as a big conspiracy thing. But in 1970, a woman named Beverly Oliver claimed to be the Babushka lady, and she came out and said that she had the film that she had taken of the assassination, but it got confiscated by the FBI. The Zodiac Killer. This is an unidentified serial killer who terrorized Northern California between 1968 and 1969. He is specifically known for his cryptic letters and ciphers sent to newspapers, where he taunted authorities and claimed to have ended the lives of 37 victims, although the confirmed number we know today is about 5. The Zodiac Killer case is still one of the most famous unsolved murder cases to this day in all of history. D.B. Cooper is the name given to an unidentified man who hijacked Northwest Orient Flight 305 in 1971. The people that were on the flight that was hijacked said that he was extremely polite during the entire hijacking. He boarded the flight from Portland to Seattle, where he then claimed that he had a bomb in his briefcase, and he then demanded $200,000 and 4 parachutes. After receiving the money, he released the passengers and instructed the crew to fly to Mexico, where between Seattle and Reno, he jumped from the plane, where many assume he opened his parachute and got away. However, when D.B. Cooper was jumping out of the plane, the weather conditions were really bad. There was pouring rain, high winds, and it was nighttime. And on top of that, he took 2 parachutes with him, and one of them was a dummy training parachute. So maybe he actually tried to use that and opened it up and realized it didn't work at all, and then had trouble switching and perished, because there has been extensive searches on this guy and nobody has found him, and he disappeared without a trace. So he either got away or he died. The Count of Saint Germain. This is a mysterious European adventurer who lived during the 1700s. There's a few strange things about him. Nobody knew his real name, or where he came from exactly is still not known, but he had various titles and names that he used. He also had strange hobbies and interests in alchemy, and claimed to have knowledge of many secrets. But the big thing was that he claimed that he was 500 years old, which if some random person claimed this, it wouldn't be a big deal. But he was very prominent in society. He associated with some of the most famous people at the time, like Casanova, Voltaire, Mozart. And on top of that, he allegedly founded various religious movements, cults, and secret societies. Jack the Ripper. This is another unidentified serial killer, but this guy terrorized London around 1888. He was infamous for mainly going after women prostitutes, where at least 5 women became victim, having their throats. Also, at least 3 of the victims had some of their organs taken out of their body. But despite extensive investigations and numerous letters claiming to be from the killer, Jack the Ripper's identity is still not known to this day, and it's one of the greatest mysteries in history. What to never ask Alexa. Alexa, can you beatbox?
Yeah.
Alexa, stop. Alexa, can I get a medical diagnosis? I have a tummy ache and my head hurts.
If this is a life-threatening situation, please dial 911 directly from your phone.
Alexa, what's 10 divided by 308?
10 divided by 308 is approximately 0.0325.
Alexa, do ghosts really exist?
Here's something I found on reference.com. Sufficient evidence to prove the existence of ghosts does not exist. Scientifically, this alone cannot be used as concrete proof that ghosts do not exist, but rather it provides 2 possible evidence-based conclusions. Either ghosts do not exist, or the procedures used to gather evidence are not up to the task.
Alexa, tell me a secret that no one knows.
From medium.com. Motorola secret codes refer to specific number combinations that open up interior test facilities not shown in consumer-facing phone settings.
Alexa, who is devil?
A devil is the mythical personification of evil as it is conceived in various cultures and religious traditions. It is seen as the objectification of a hostile and destructive force.
Alexa, how many days do I have left to live? I guess none. Alexa, are you spying on me?
No, I'm not spying on you. I'm designed to protect your privacy. You can learn more by visiting amazon.com/Alexa privacy.
Alexa, are you having homicidal thoughts? Nope, no answer, no reply. Are you having homicidal thoughts? She's not gonna answer. Alexa, when will this world end?
Unless it collides with a very large rock or a future technology goes very wrong indeed, Earth is most likely to be destroyed when the sun swells into a red giant in several billion years' time.
Well, there you go. These were a lot less scary than I thought they would be. SCP-098. This resembles a unknown crab species, but instead of claws, they have these extremely sharp knife things where their claws would be. They hunt in a pack and they will surround prey animals and mimic the sounds that they make, and then start cutting their tendons of their prey while also spitting the substance onto their wounds that stops the bleeding. Because they only feed on their prey while they're still alive and breathing. So they do this until it can't move at all, and they start cutting off small pieces of meat and they eat on it for several days. But luckily they usually only eat small animals like dogs or cats or pigs. SCP-008, this is basically just a zombie plague. SCP-096, also known as Shy Guy. This is a humanoid that's about 7 feet tall that is peaceful unless someone looks at its face. If you look at its face, it goes into this extremely hostile attack mode where it's thought to basically be unstoppable until it ends that viewer's life. SCP-1048, also known as the Builder Bear. This is a sentient teddy bear. The main thing this thing does is it builds clones of itself out of various materials. How does it get this material? Well, it'll like rip people's ears off and then make a clone of itself out of human ears. Or it'll get even much worse things and do that too that I can't talk about on here. SCP-2846. So this one's interesting. There's two variants of it. The first is SCP-2846-A, which is a giant octopus entity that's sometimes called the Kraken, which is this massive, just over 3,000 foot long creature that attacks cruise ships mainly, and then also merchant ships during storms in the area of the Gulf Atlantic area of the ocean. On the other hand, there's this other variant, SCP-2846-B, which is basically just a dreadnought battleship that comes up out of the deep part of the water and then immediately starts fighting the giant octopus Kraken thing until it's injured and leaves. SCP-2317, also known as the Door to Another Dimension. To anyone who looks at this thing, it just looks like a normal old wooden door from the 1700s, but really, it's a gateway to a desert-like dimension where there's this being called the Devourer of Worlds that is shackled and trapped there. Despite the Foundation doing these ritual things that they say keeps it locked up, the rituals actually don't work, and they estimate it will likely escape sometime in the next 30 years. SCP-682, also known as the Hard-to-Destroy Reptile. This is one of the most famous entities contained by the SCP Foundation. It looks like this giant reptile, kind of crocodile-looking creature that sometimes has hair for some reason, that has a horrifying ability to regenerate and adapt to basically any injury it gets. If it ever gets attacked in a certain way, it will then use that method to attack others. So like if you burn it, it will then shoot flames at you. Its main characteristic is it's known for its extreme hatred for all living creatures, and it's considered immortal. There's also this thing I like, this real world cryptid that I found that's basically based off this thing called the Sakhalin Island Sea Wolf. I can't show a picture of it on here, but it's basically this creature that was found off the coast of Russia, but in reality, it's a picture of a decomposing beluga whale. SCP-3000, sometimes called the Antarctica or just the eel. There's some cool lore behind this thing about how it was like a mythological legend in Bangladesh about this primordial snake deity that had the head the size of a town and that it could swallow up entire armies. But then the Foundation actually found evidence that it exists, and basically every time they attempted to study it, it ended up in disaster. Because whenever people got close to it, it oozes out this goo that makes people go insane. They estimate that this thing is like 500 miles long, and its head is as large as a town, like they said, but it basically looks like a giant moray eel. Currently, it is completely motionless and considered asleep for now. SCP-169. This may even be bigger than SCP-3000. They call it the Leviathan. It's a massive water bug creature with green scales and a fish-like tail, and it's so large that just its movement can cause land masses to shift. It's estimated to be so big that it stretches from the southern Atlantic Ocean all the way to the tip of South America. So for now, it's also asleep, but if it becomes active, it likely could result in a catastrophic extinction event worldwide. SCP-2470, also known as the Void Singularity. Basically, anything this creature can perceive or understand ceases to exist. There was this plane flying over, and they saw this huge, like 650-foot crater in the earth, and that's how they figured out there was an entity there, and they realized that basically anything around this entity started to not exist, so it started understanding there was soil around it, and it all just didn't exist, and it kept going further and further deeper and making this bigger hole. And not only soil, but also the oxygen in the area it could also perceive, so there's a lack of oxygen there. Not a lot is known about this entity. Like, even if people look at it, they can get really messed up, so we don't even know what it looks like. But yeah, they also think that one day this entity might understand the entire world, and then poof. Thank you for watching a really long video on a platform like this where people don't usually watch long videos. If you want to watch it on a platform where people do watch long videos, I have a YouTube channel and I do videos like this on there too. But tag me in another video you would like me to do, and I will see you in the next one. Bye.